5 could see a lot of rain in a short space of time. Following on from that, we'll see plenty of showers packing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. Into the weekend, though, the showers fading. Many places looking dry on Saturday. We are expecting some rain on Sunday, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and a very warm welcome to GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. The Prime Minister is in Prague today. She's attending the first ever session of the European Political Community.
So, all eyes on the Prime Minister as she tries to unite Europe against Russian aggression, expected to tell those European leaders that Europe is now facing its biggest crisis since World War II. So could it herald a closer relationship with her European counterparts?
We'll be bringing you details of all of the meetings that Liz Truss will have today, including the one between the Prime Minister and her French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron.
Yes, remember during the Tory leadership contest, she said the jury was out on whether President Macron was friend or foe for Britain, as she changed her mind.
So we'll be bringing you all the details of what's happening in Prague, where our Prime Minister is today, but we'll also be talking about mortgages, about potential nursing strikes, and also I've got a real meat interview with the Conservative MP, Lee Anderson.
For that, latest headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Police in Thailand say at least 34 people have been killed, including 22 children, after a gunman opened fire at a childcare centre. It happened in the northeastern province of Nong Bua Lampu. Thai police say the gunman was a former officer. He was discharged from the police force last year and had appeared in court on drugs charges prior to opening fire. They've confirmed he killed himself, his wife and his own child during the mass shooting. City of London Police says 3 people have been stabbed in an incident in Bishopsgate near Liverpool Street Station. Posting on social media, the force said the victims had been taken to hospital, but their condition is not thought to be life-threatening. GB News understands the incident began after members of the public tried to intervene in a phone theft. Police are looking for 2 suspects. No arrests have been made. The force says the incident remains ongoing, but isn't being treated as terror-related. The Prime Minister is at a summit in Prague today for an historic first meeting of a new political club of nations. Liz Truss will call for European unity and address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges. She'll say Europe is facing its biggest crisis since the Second World War following Russian aggression. Liz Truss will also hold talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron in what could mark a new phase in the UK's post-Brexit relations with Europe. Hate crimes in England and Wales have increased by 26% in the last year, but police are prosecuting a small proportion of those offences. Official figures show there were over 155,000 hate crimes recorded by officers up to March this year. It's the biggest increase in hate crimes in 5 years, but the number of offences resulting in a police charge are at 8% of the total recorded. The Royal College of Nursing is balloting its members for strike action for the first time in its 106-year history. Around 300,000 nurses will vote whether to walk out over pay. They're calling for an above-inflation increase. It's amid warnings that record numbers of nurses are leaving the industry. The RCN's General Secretary says it's a once-in-a-generation chance to improve staff shortages and nurses' pay. The result of the ballot is due early next month. Meanwhile, around 500 emergency call handlers have joined a BT Group walkout today in a dispute over pay. The Communication Workers Union, which represents BT workers, had previously agreed to exempt 999 staff from the strike action. The CWU says the position has changed after widespread outrage at the company's refusal to negotiate. A further 3 days of walkouts are planned to take place later this month. The union's General Secretary Dave Ward told GB News BT are upping the ante.
I mean, it cannot be right that call centre workers earning between £21,000 and £27,000 a year are having to go on strike. They're at a tipping point. The actual situation with BT is that they are refusing to negotiate. They've had 2.5 weeks' notice of this dispute. We would rather be in a room sitting with them today trying to get this dispute resolved than being out on strike.
The Chancellor will meet with UK banks and building societies later amid rising mortgage rates following the mini-budget last month. Kwasi Kwarteng will attempt to calm executives ahead of his plans to loosen market regulation in financial services. A number of high street lenders, including HSBC, Santander and Virgin Money, have withdrawn products for new borrowers after the mini-budget announcement. The typical rate for a 2-year fixed mortgage has risen above 6%. For the first time in 14 years. At least 2 people have been killed in Ukraine's southern city of Zaporizhia. Ukrainian officials say Russian rockets hit residential buildings overnight. The city is one of 4 Ukrainian regions annexed by Russia. Kyiv says it'll never accept the illegal seizure of its territory by force, which has been condemned by Ukraine's allies. Meanwhile, President Zelensky claims Ukraine's counteroffensive is continuing to gain ground as 3 more villages in the Kherson region are liberated. At least 17 people have died in a shipwreck off the Greek island of Lesbos. The country's Coast Guard says it's the second maritime disaster involving migrants in less than a day. The boat was carrying around 40 people. 8 have been rescued so far. A search is underway for those still missing. And Kevin Spacey is due to appear in a US court to face an allegation he sexually assaulted a boy 36 years ago. Actor Anthony Rapp claims he was the victim of an unwanted sexual advance at a party in 1986 when he was just 14 years old. The trial comes less than 3 months after the Oscar-winning actor appeared in a UK court where he faces a separate 5 charges of sexual assault. Mr. Spacey denies all of the accusations against him. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Mark and Gloria.
Rhiannon, thanks very much indeed. Let's return to that breaking news that Rhiannon brought us in the bulletin. 3 people stabbed in the centre of London at Bishopsgate near Liverpool Street Station. Let's cross there. Our news correspondent Rosie Wright has the latest for us there. Rosie, with, I gather, still a huge emergency operation underway.
Good afternoon to you, Mark. Yes, a significant police operation underway and also a significant police cordon. We're right in the heart of the city of London, really, the financial district. Police are investigating what they're calling a suspected robbery. Now, one police officer told me the details are sketchy, but I'll tell you what we do know. 4 people have been injured, 3 taken by London Ambulance Service to hospital this morning with injuries that are not thought to be life-threatening. What happened, the police believe, is that a member of the public was using their phone. There was an attempted phone snatch, and it was when members of the public intervened that's when they got injured. We know at least of 1 stabbing, 1 slashing. We don't know if one of the people taken to hospital was the person who had their phone stolen. At this point, there have been no arrests made, and there are no suspects. I must stress the police say this is not, they believe, terror related. The second thing to be really aware of is lots of misinformation flying around online, particularly on Twitter. Just be really cautious. At this point, the police have said no arrests have been made. The incident happened at 9:46 this morning. By 9:51, officers were on the scene, a significant police presence, and of course the London Ambulance Service, who then, after they were initially treated here, took 3 people to a nearby hospital. As and when we get further details, we'll let you know. The police anticipate that this cordon will be in place for another couple of hours. As you can see, lots of members of the public, busy day in the financial world, people walking past very concerned about what's happened. Eyewitnesses are seeing, and there is some blood on the pavement, so that's been distressing for people walking past, but it is not terror related, police believe. No arrests yet, and 2 suspects. As we get more information, we'll bring it to you here.
And Rosie, from what you've seen, bearing in mind they're saying no arrests yet, I mean, are they searching that particular area? Some of those police operating a manhunt, effectively?
Police say they're looking at a suspected robbery. Investigations are underway. That's all the details that we have it now. And I'll use that word again, as one of the police officers said to me, details are sketchy. One of the things, the piece of misinformation that's being spread online is that an arrest has been made. Police here have not confirmed that. So I just say be really cautious of the information that you see online.
Rosie, thank you very much indeed for that. And of course, back to you as we get more details. Thanks.
Now, Prime Minister Liz Truss arrived in Prague for the first meeting of the European political community. Liz Truss will attend the meeting of leaders from across Europe and is expected to reiterate her support for Ukraine and push for collective action on energy security and migration, delivering on UK priorities.
Well, will it be another handshake? Because she's due to meet her foe or friend, President Macron, expected to discuss the migrant crisis with him. Well, joining us now from Prague, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. And I guess, Darren, all eyes will be on the mood music as to whether that entente will still be cordial.
Yeah, indeed. And actually, Liz Truss was asked about this the other night. I was at a meeting with her and other journalists, and she insisted that friend or foe comment, actually on GBNews, wasn't it, a couple of months ago, that was a bit of banter, she said, that he is a friend. Maybe that's not surprising given the fact that, frankly, and the government have been pretty honest about this, they are going to have to rely quite a lot on France if they do want to tackle the English boat crisis in the English Channel. And I suspect you're right, migration clearly will be a key topic with Emmanuel Macron. There have been lots of suggestions, actually, that he was on the verge of signing a deal with Liz Truss until she made that comment. He then scrapped it, and there is an attempt, I think, by her and indeed by the government to try and cosy up to the French again. This, in effect, though, is his brainchild, this European political community that's meeting in Prague today. His idea that he wants to reassert Europe's place on the world stage beyond the European Union's 27 member states. That's why you've got 44 nation states here, including Turkey, Azerbaijan, lots of the Western Balkan states, Norway, and of course the United Kingdom. And Liz Truss' argument about all of this is, yes, we're, approaching this all a little bit cautiously to work out what precisely Emmanuel Macron wants to gain from all of this. But some of the key issues that the government is approaching, whether it's on migration, energy security, that war in Ukraine does need European solidarity. Not just is she meeting Emmanuel Macron, she's also meeting the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, maybe even the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen later. But she has just had a meeting with the Czech Prime Minister in the last hour or so, and we had a readout, a kind of statement from Number 10 on the details of that, and they talked about how the UK and the Czech Republic's early support for Ukraine's defence and military aid helped essentially is helping President Zelensky, who's going to dial into this conference later as well. And they also noted the long-term opportunities for the countries to work together to secure those long-term energy supplies, including cooperation on nuclear energy and renewable. Those three baskets really key to this summit, if you like, Mark, i.e. energy security, really important. Norway is here, UK trying to sell and sign, some long-term deals with them. Clearly that war in Ukraine, trying to maintain that united front. And then also, as I say, on this issue of migration, we very sadly saw dozens more migrants die in the last couple of days or so trying to get into Greece. A reminder that this migration issue, not confined to the United Kingdom, it is an issue Europe has grappled with for years. And frankly, let's be honest about this, if it's going to be dealt with in a kind of relatively satisfactory way for all sides, it is going to have to be a European approach to that. There is going to have to be some form of cooperation.
And Darren, what's the chance of this just being another talking shop, or actually any leaders walking away with practical solutions to some of the things that you have raised there?
Well, we're really interested, an example of this. I mean, you're right, Gloria, lots of times these things are merely talking shops and, they meet. Though in some ways, diplomacy is the art of talking, isn't it, and agreeing on things and presenting a united front. But, look at this, for example, in that statement I was just giving you from the the Czech Prime Minister, a relation to the fact that the UK is now going to resume its partnership in the North Seas Energy Cooperation Group, i.e. working on those interconnectors to make sure that, the energy supply across Europe is connected so that people can kind of pick up the slack if somehow one bit of it falls down. So that is a practical evidence that sometimes these meetings do have an effect. Now, that had happened beforehand, but it is a sign of the cooperation that could come. I think what's really interesting also in this is that we are seeing a different approach from Liz Truss when it comes to the relationship with Europe. Boris Johnson had a pretty standoffish approach. Theresa May, for slightly obvious reasons, had the same. It's clear Liz Truss does view this slightly differently, in a more cautious way as well, but slightly differently. She's even suggested that the UK could well host the next one of these in less than 6 months' time, and that's quite notable. But it is also extraordinary that she's come here for a bit of respite, frankly. That's not normally what happens to British Prime Ministers when they come to the European continent. But given what's happening at home, given the comments from Nadine Dorries today, former, of course, Culture Secretary, suggesting that Liz Truss is in a lot of trouble, that she needs to change course or could lose by a landslide, maybe the next kind of 12 hours here in Prague will be a bit of a relief, frankly.
Yeah, and Darren, just to ask, are they just flying a flag on this meeting in London, or is that a serious proposition to get back on the European stage?
I think it is. Again, this was brought up the other night when we had that meeting with Liz Truss. She seemed pretty committed to it. I think they're obviously trying to work out how this summit goes. Very brief one, by the way. There are round tables. We got those bilateral meetings a little later on, but Liz Truss will be back in London tonight. Now, EU leaders are staying on for their summit here tomorrow. But no, I think there is a genuine change of tone, I would say, and approach when it comes to our relations with not just the European Union, but clearly everywhere else. And the war in Ukraine has helped that, because clearly Britain knows it is part of a wider Western coalition of trying to help Ukraine defeat Vladimir Putin. And I suspect we may well see that meeting in London. But as I say, given Liz Truss' domestic problems, there'll be bigger questions, even maybe who will host it. We'll not go down that route. But, things are pretty tricky at home. But she's determined, as I say, to assert Britain on the international stage again.
Yeah, long weekend in Prague looks quite attractive at the moment indeed. Darren, thanks very much indeed.
Pleased to be joined now by Anand Menon, Director at the UK in a Changing Europe think tank. Hi, welcome to the show. Obviously, we've left the European Union, but we are still part of Europe. But is there a danger at meetings like this? It's a two-tier, that some leaders are more important than others, or is everyone on an equal footing when it comes to a meeting like the one that's taking place today?
I mean, there is a danger, but I think the Foreign Office is satisfied that it doesn't apply in this case, because they issued a statement saying, the Europeans are treating us as a sovereign equal. So I don't think that's the concern. I think the concern about the European political community really is about whether it can be anything more than a talking shop. If you have 44 national leaders in a room together for a day, you suspect that not much is going to get done. So actually, I think the key parts of today are not the sort of formal plenary sessions, which will be talking shops, but the bilaterals you were talking about a minute ago, whether she can actually come to some agreement with President Macron about small boats, whether she can talk to the presidents of the European Commission about the standoff over the protocol. It's those informal, sort of unrecorded meetings that I think are going to be fundamental.
Yeah, and how important is it that she tries to build bridges on that, given what's been, as Darren McCaffrey was saying, a rather frosty relationship between Britain and the rest of Europe during the Johnson administration?
Well, I think as a general principle, talking is better than not talking. And of course, the alternative to Liz Truss not being there would be being the only leader who wasn't there. So, it is a positive sign that she's there. I wouldn't personally read too much into this. There's a lot of noises off that, this new tone means there's going to be a breakthrough. I think we'll have to wait and see on that. There's no sign of the British government changing, for instance, its substantive position on the Northern Ireland Protocol. But it is reassuring that the mood music seems a bit more positive, and it is good that she's there and talking to her counterparts.
And she's a new leader. How does she make her stand? Basically, how do you make friends and influence people as a new leader? She'll be meeting some of these people, perhaps for the first time, although, of course, she was Foreign Secretary.
Well, it's difficult, but I think, this is all about building relationships, and we can't expect her to do it in one afternoon in Prague, but you do that over time. And I think continuing to talk to people, getting to know them, is key to successful diplomacy. So this, I think, is a good start. And I think actually being there, showing willing, and as you were talking about, offering to host a meeting in London down the line, are all positive signs of engaging with this thing, whatever this thing turns out to be.
What price, however, do you think they'll try and extract for agreeing to things? I mean, could that be the Northern Ireland Protocol, that they really want Britain to move on the substantive issue?
Well, they'd love it if we were to make concessions on the Northern Ireland Protocol. I'm not sure that Liz Truss is strong enough domestically to take her party on that issue. I think there are two things here. There are the specific issues between us and the European Union, and they're very hard to resolve. There's the broader question of, I think all the other leaders will be happy that Liz Truss is there, because, as you were saying, Europe as a whole faces common problems, whether it's Russia, whether it's energy, and having the United Kingdom round the table for those discussions is a win for them. It's a win for everyone.
And a man from UK in a changing Europe, or maybe they'll have to change that to the changing UK in Europe. I don't know, but we'll just see. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll be speaking with a former senior NHS nurses for the first time in the Royal College of Nursing's 106-year history. Nurses are being balloted on strike action. Next, it's you.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. For many, a fine, bright day out there today. There's a fair bit of cloud across parts of south of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a few showers likely here. It's quite breezy as well, but not as windy as yesterday. Low pressure dominant to the north. High pressure, though, controlling things further south, which means much of southern England, South Wales, won't see many showers at all. Staying dry and bright here, and the same goes for much of eastern England and northeast Scotland. It's further north and west where we've got more cloud and some outbreaks of rain pushing into North Wales and northwest England, across Northern Ireland and parts of western Scotland. A mixture of sunshine and blustery showers across the far north. In the sunny spells further south, well, temperatures getting up into the high teens, 20 Celsius is just about possible. Generally, we're looking at 16 or 17 the high. Through this evening, I think we'll see a bit more rain just moving through the central belt of Scotland, so turning fairly damp here. In fact, right across Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of rain for much of the night. Could be quite heavy, especially through the early hours, and we'll see rain returning to Northern Ireland as well overnight. Again, much of England and Wales staying dry. A milder night than last night. Temperatures mostly holding up in double figures. On to the details for Friday, and we'll be watching this band of rain as it sinks south. It's going to be quite heavy, starting off across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, heading quite quickly into northern England, then into parts of Wales. Either side of that, reasonably bright skies and just a few showers. But as this sinks southwards, could turn into quite a lively line of heavy rain, not lasting too long, but intense rain and squally winds where they just suddenly pick up over parts of the Midlands, Lincolnshire, South Wales and southwest England come the afternoon. Eventually getting into East Anglia and the southeast for Friday evening's rush hour. M25 could see a lot of rain in a short space of time. Following on from that, we'll see plenty of showers packing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. Into the weekend, though, the showers fading. Many places looking dry on Saturday. We are expecting some rain on Sunday, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Plenty of strikes in the headlines. Now we have to ask, could nurses be going on strike? Well, the Royal College of Nursing is to ballot its members for possible strike action, which will be the first time in its 106-year history.
Around 300,000 nurses will vote on whether to walk out or overpay. They're calling for a rise of 5% above inflation increase.
Well, it also comes amid warnings that record numbers of nurses are actually leaving the health service. The RCN's General Secretary saying the only way to prevent them leaving is to pay them a decent wage. The result of that ballot due early next month, we're told.
Let's talk to barrister and former NHS senior nurse, Rebecca Butler. Rebecca, the NHS has probably changed quite a bit since you were working there, and that probably is why nurses for the first time are ready to take strike action, or are balloting at least to take strike action.
I hate to correct you, Gloria. Good afternoon. Actually, nurses did strike when I was in the NHS, and it led to a major restructuring of nurses' pay at the time. But this time we are in a completely different environment. And we are looking at an inflationary picture that nurses who have only just had their pay review body approved, some of which received 9.4% in this summer in that pay review, which reported in February, they're now saying that actually the cost of living crisis is hitting us. You only brought us up to speed. Now we are going to suffer a lag. And this is all part of this wage inflationary cycle that you're seeing with the RMT, actually with barristers as well, another thing that touches my area of expertise, and now nursing. I mean, it is hardly surprising with spiralling costs of wages. There is another issue to point out here, though, and I did talk about this on your programme the other day. This narrative that nurses are leaving the profession, I find it an extremely hard narrative to believe, because actually a newly qualified staff nurse is paid well above the average wage, and I cannot for a minute believe that a qualified nurse would leave the NHS to go and work in an Amazon warehouse or a pub on a 0-hour contract at minimum wage.
But why is it, therefore, do you think that the RCN, Royal College of Nursing, is saying this, that hundreds of thousands of nursing vacancies across the country have not been filled? Nurses are struggling to provide safe care due to a lack of staffing.
Well, actually, if you look at the Nursing and Midwifery Council data set on this, actually there hasn't been a massive number of nurses leaving. Only about 13.8, call it 14% left as a direct consequence of the pandemic. Now, these are people who have been surveyed in their sort of exit interviews. You always have a natural loss through retirement. But then if you look at the other end on the recruitment side, universities have never had so much demand for nursing places. So if anything, the pandemic and all of the plaudits that nurses received during that period actually encouraged recruitment.
Yeah.
So there's always been chronic understaffing, but really, I just don't accept that it's at the crisis point that it is. I know
Rebecca,
people are demoralised.
Yeah, can I just put something that I experienced personally? I went, and this is actually a GP surgery rather than a hospital, but a nurse who was there giving the flu jabs and the COVID jabs was telling me in confidence that she had applied to a job at Burger King as a fairly high grade of job there because it paid more than she was getting as a practice nurse at the GP surgery. I mean, that tells its own story, doesn't it?
For one person at one Burger King for one post, yes, of course it does.
Well, if you multiply that by all the GP surgeries, and that may explain some of these problems.
That is not the narrative that I have from my friends who are practice nurses, are senior nurses now. Right. My family, who are junior doctors, they find the NHS a fantastic employer. In fact, one of the criticisms of the NHS is actually that it does sometimes prioritise its staff over its patients. But I don't accept the narrative that you would leave a reasonably well-paid postgraduate environment, which is actually a very nice working environment.
I mean, they do point out that real terms earnings for nurses have fallen by 6% compared with 3.2% for private sector employees. That is a statistic. But we could talk to you for much longer, Rebecca, but we're going to go to the news now. But we thank you for your thoughts and your time on today's news story of nurses balloting.
Thank you for having me.
OK, it is, I think, now time to get an update. Rhiannon's waiting for us.
Thank you, Mark. It's 12:30. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. At least 34 people have been killed, including 22 children, some as young as 2 years old, after a gunman opened fire at a childcare centre in Thailand. The shooting happened in the northeastern province of Nong Bua Lampu. Thai police say the gunman was a former officer discharged from the police force last year. He'd appeared in court only hours before the attack, on trial for drugs charges. They've confirmed he killed himself, his wife and his child during the mass shooting. City of London Police says 3 people have been stabbed in an incident in Bishopsgate near Liverpool Street Station. The force said the victims have been taken to hospital and their condition isn't thought to be life-threatening. The incident happened at around 9:45 this morning. Police are treating the incident as a suspected robbery and are looking for 2 suspects. No arrests have been made. The Prime Minister is at a summit in Prague today for a historic first meeting of a new political club of nations. Liz Truss will call for European unity and address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges. She'll say Europe is facing its biggest crisis since the Second World War following Russian aggression. Liz Truss will also hold talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron in what could mark a new phase in the UK's post-Brexit relations with Europe. The Royal College of Nursing is balloting its members for strike action for the first time in its 106-year history. Around 300,000 nurses will vote whether to walk out over pay. They're demanding an above-inflation increase. The RCN's General Secretary says it's a once-in-a-generation chance to improve staff shortages and nurses' pay. The result of the ballot is due early next month. Meanwhile, around 500 emergency call handlers are set to join a BT Group Walkout today. The Communication Workers Union, which represents BT workers, had previously agreed to exempt 999 staff from the strike action. The CWU said the position had changed after widespread outrage at the company's refusal to negotiate. Further walkouts are planned later this month. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark and Gloria will be back in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
At least 34 people have been killed and others injured in a gun and knife attack by a former police officer at a preschool daycare centre in Thailand.
Well, it's reported to have happened in a remote northeastern province, Nong Wu Lampu. Thai police saying the gunman, a former officer. He'd been discharged from the force last year and had also appeared in court on drugs charges prior to reportedly opening fire. Police say he then killed himself and his family following the manhunt and the attack.
Well, we can now go live to Thailand and speak to journalist Janine Pak-T-Dun. Janine, thank you for joining us. Just tell us, bring us the latest, and how are people feeling? It's just such a god-awful story to report.
Yeah, this is a tragic story coming out of Thailand. People are expressing their condolences all over social media. There are a lot of posts out about blood donation at a hospital nearby because there are so many people injured from the incident. As you recapped earlier, the former police officer, 34 years old, he used an automatic weapon to fire at the daycare center in Nong Wu province near Thailand's border with Laos in the Thursday afternoon today, killing at least 23 children. Authorities said the motive behind the crime was unclear, but the suspect has been identified as Payap Pamrat. He was believed to be under the influence of drugs. And after fleeing the scene, he shot dead more people while driving back to his house where he killed his wife and a child, and then he took his own life.
What's being done to help all those families now going through, well, one can't imagine what they're going through, of course, having to identify bodies and actually deal with the aftermath?
The Prime Minister, Prayut Chan-o-cha, has expressed his condolences, and authorities are working to help those family in terms of what they're doing. They're now trying to get blood at the hospital, small donation, so we can help those injured as quickly as possible.
A national appeal, is it, for people to help by giving blood?
Yes.
And just tell us about the overall situation with drugs problems in the country. I mean, we've heard over many years about the Golden Triangle and all the sort of drug smuggling that went on. This is in a different area.
This is in the northeastern area. Yes, Thailand has a lot of drug issues, and the government has been quite active on that. But what I think is very important is to pay close attention to the frequency of the mass shooting is actually happened in Thailand. This is a rare occurrence because the last one that happened was in February 2020. That happened because a disgruntled former soldier, he started shooting at a military barrack and then he went to the mall. That shooting actually resulted in 29 people.
OK, yeah, well, it's sobering stuff, isn't it? But Janine Paktidum, thank you very much indeed for updating us on that. And, of course, we'll update people as we get more details on that awful, awful toll of death. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng will be meeting with the major banks, including Barclays and NatWest, to discuss the impact of recent financial market turmoil on the mortgage market. Mortgage rates have been soaring, with a rate on a typical 2-year fixed rate mortgage reaching 6% for the first time in 14 years. That's according to the financial information service Moneyfacts.
Well, Labour's leader Keir Starmer has also called on Liz Truss to address the problem, pleading that homeowners across the UK, he said, having sleepless nights.
Joining us now is Mark Bogard. He's a mortgage expert and chief executive at the Family Building Expert. Thanks for joining us. If your fixed rate is just about to expire, or you know it's going to in the next few months, what on earth are you supposed to do?
Well, you don't have much choice, really. I think it was Mrs. Thatcher who said you can't buck the markets, but the mini budget made things a lot worse for people. And I'm not quite sure what the Chancellor's going to be saying to the banks because, interest rates have gone up. And that is the drug that mortgage holders, companies and governments are going to have to come off. And it's going to be very, very painful.
Yeah, he's meeting, we understand, more banking leaders today at the Treasury. I mean, is he perhaps going to try and persuade them to hold off for a moment, or is he just trying to maybe find a way through this together with them?
You can't hold off because, it's a bit like energy. There is a price for money,
well, the government
and you have to live with that.
The government have helped us on energy.
The only thing that the Bank of England did during COVID is introduce a scheme which effectively lent money to banks and building societies at low rates, which provided a little lot of liquidity and helped keep mortgage prices low.
So, I mean, Mark, do you have any words of advice or comfort for people who are going to really be... They could be in a position where they have to pull out of buying their dream home. They have to move out of their home because they're not going to be able to keep up with mortgage payments if their fixed rate is up for renewal, or they could be on a variable rate, about 2 million people are, and they just can't afford the payments. Is there anything... any words of advice that you can offer?
So 2 things. If you're struggling with payments, you should talk immediately to your lender, and they have an obligation to help you according to your individual circumstances. And if you're coming up to the end of your mortgage period, your best bet is to talk to a qualified mortgage advisor who will help you get the best deal in the current circumstances.
Out there, what's the best case scenario? Because the reports are that, you're looking at 5-6%.
Yeah, I mean, just to show how dramatic this has been, the TSB had the lowest 2-year fixed mortgage rate when interest rates were very low at 0.74. Their current rate is 6.8%. So it's come up by 6%, and that is a huge and dramatic impact. and it is going to be very painful.
Given that, is it worth people trying to hold off as long as possible and maybe just whatever that they have to sign at the moment, going for a variable rate or a tracker? Because clearly the Bank of England, if we are going to go into recession next year, may have to start cutting rates at some stage.
Well, that is the key to this. And I went through this when I got my first mortgage in 1989. It was at 7.25%, and 18 months later it was 15.25%, and I really couldn't afford it, and my father had to help me. The markets are expecting interest rates to come back down at the end of 23 or into 24.
Yeah.
The problem with getting a variable rate is you don't know how high it might go. The advantage of having a fixed rate is if you can live with your fixed rate for 2 or 5 years, then that gives you certainty. But at the moment, you can still get variable rates for between 3 and 4%, but the market is expecting rates to go up. And so that your variable rate will go up with that. But it does depend where they peak.
Right, OK. It's still a bit of a headache, but there might be a bit of light at the end of the tunnel and at the end of next year. Mark Bogard, thanks very much indeed from the Family Building Society. Thank you.
We now have an exclusive interview with the Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson. I used to be the MP for Ashfield. Lee Anderson used to work for me. Then he jumped ship to the Tories.
What did you say to him then?
I think it might have. Well, as you will find out, I don't think it was to do with me. But this was one of those. I mean, sort of, it wasn't a conventional interview, of course, because we know each other so well, and there has been
all
history.
Each other's secrets. There we go. I'm going to watch this as well.
I started off by asking him if, when he did work for me, when he was a Labour councillor, he'd been a Labour Party member for decades, really. Did he believe in Labour values then?
I did, yeah. I sort of believed in what I thought Labour values were, the traditional Labour working class values, which comes back from, like I always say, Gloria, in the 1970s when I was brought up, it was Skinner, Scargill and Tony Benn. That's what we listened to in our house, and that's what many people listened to in villages across Nottinghamshire, South Yorkshire, Derbyshire, in the pit villages. So that was sort of gospel. And I campaigned early in the 80s when Michael Foot was the leader of the Labour Party. We know how that ended. And then rejoined the party, I think, in 2010.
When Labour lost.
Yeah, and then a couple of years later, I had the good fortune to go and work for the Labour MP in Ashfield, and that's when I sort of found the Labour Party out a little bit. Not yourself, because I thought you was a decent MP and a sensible member of the Labour Party, but obviously I became a Labour councillor and got involved with the Labour group at Ashfield Council, who were Momentum at the time, very, very left-wing. And I just thought to myself, my goodness, this is not what I joined the Labour Party for. I don't want to be signing books of condolence for Fidel Castro and waving silly flags about at conference. And they was more interested, should I say, in waving the flags of places like Palestine than actually talking about real poverty in Ashfield. And that's what I sort of wanted to get in politics for, to make a difference. So,
do you think then, if you'd have been a Labour councillor in a different area, obviously those people aren't here to defend themselves, but you make your point. Might you not have left the Labour Party if it was so local?
No,
what you found out.
No, I mean the local was one thing. As a Labour Party member from a working class area, I'm waking up thinking to myself, my goodness, I'm in the same party of some of your old colleagues, your Thornburys, your McDonalds, your Jeremy Corbyns. I'm thinking, what these people are in places like Ashfield, they would never get voted in. They are seen as political lunatics, so far removed from what actually working class people believe in. These are ideological politicians. They're not, you couldn't put them in the local Wetherspoons or the local
Would you put Jacob Rees-Mogg in the local
Yes,
Wetherspoons?
I would. Absolutely,
Right,
100%.
okay,
I could, Jacob, although he's a posh man, he's come from a privileged background, he can speak to anybody. But if you drag somebody like McDonnell or Corbyn into my local miners' welfare, they would get ripped apart just because of their beliefs.
Have you lost any friends or had any arguments with family members since you changed your political identity? You had a very clear political identity before, and you have a very clear political identity now.
We've had conversations. I've not lost any friends because I've not got many real friends anyway. I've probably got 6 or 7 real friends, and these are the friends I went to school with.
Yeah.
So real friends should not fall out over politics. Probably the hardest thing for me was one of my sons, my youngest son, Harry. He's a massive socialist, and he was a member of the Labour Party. I'm not sure if he still is. A big Corbyn fan as well. So he was very upset when I joined the Conservative Party. But you know what? Blood's thicker than water. You get over these things, and I just spoke to him today actually. He's off on his holidays next week, and I just wish, says I hope you have a nice time. So yeah, I mean, obviously, people do get on your case sometimes when you make that transition. But a lot of those people who were a little bit grumpy with me for joining the Tory party, 18 months later, they all voted for me. And so did 5 million other ex-Labour voters voted Tory for the first time in 2019.
Are you and Harry okay now?
Yes, absolutely fine.
But there was a difficult period at the election.
Yeah, obviously, because when you're at university and you're a proper socialist and...
Didn't he become a vegetarian? I seem to remember.
Oh, yes, he did.
The stories he was telling me when we worked together.
Yes, he did. He sat me down. He'd been at uni about 6 months. He says, Dad, I've got something to tell you. I'm not like you thought I was. And I thought, he says, I'm a vegetarian. I thought, that's terrible. It's the first vegetarian ever in my family.
And I know that's true because I remember you coming. So you and Harry are...
We're fine.
You're fine.
We're best mates.
Okay, you're happily married now. And I know that there have been moments of real... you fell in love with somebody, Sinead, who has cystic fibrosis, and I knew you when she was waiting for the transplant, when she had the transplant, and I saw the effect of that stress on you. I mean, then you went through COVID, which must have been incredibly worrying for you because she had underlying health conditions. What's it like to be married to somebody who has a condition as serious as cystic fibrosis?
Well, it's much better now than when it was, because at the time when she had a transplant, she'd only got a few months to live. And she was on the transplant list for, I think it was 2 years, nearly to the day. She had 5 false alarms. Where we get to theatre at Papworth Hospital, we get you ready, get you gowned up, and then the surgeon says, sorry, it's not going ahead. So you think, oh dear. And that happened 5 times. But on the 6th time, he said, right, it's going ahead. And that's when it hit her. She sort of broke down and said, I don't want to have it done. I'm going to die. Because there's a big chance you're going to die on the operating table. So no, I had a little chat with her, saying, look, it's either have it done or you're going to die anyway. So she agreed to have it done. After about 7 or 8 hours, the surgeon came out and says, it's not looking that good. We can't get one of the lungs out. It's just, it's disappeared. And then 14 hours later, he came out and says, we've done it. We're going to sew her back up, but she's going to be out of it for a few days. But I think 12 or 13 days after the lung transplant, she walked out and we went home. We went back up to Ashfield. And within 2 weeks, she was moaning at me and telling me to sort the house out and clean up and get the garden done. So I thought, well, she's back to normal. So, but it was a difficult journey, Gloria. The physical part of a transplant is difficult, but the mental part is, living with the thought that you've got somebody's organs inside your body. That's the bit she struggled to cope with, and that's hard for me to empathise or sympathise with because I don't know. It's very difficult. But we met the donor's family, we've met them several times, and we've got a good relationship with them, and she's fine now. She's a councillor. She's a county councillor and a district councillor. So, yeah, things are good.
And your health hasn't always been perfect, has it? And I don't know what age this was at, but I remember you...
36 I was.
36, and you got testicular...
I did, yeah.
Testicular cancer.
Yeah, I did. I went to the doctor. Well, the first thing you do when you get a pain is you Google it and then frighten yourself to death, don't you? And we all Google.
Was Google around when you were 36?
No, very funny. Well, the internet was around, and I checked it out. I thought, I've got this, and so I went to see the doctor, and I told him what I'd got. He says, no, don't be silly. It's just a bit of swelling. I says, no, I want a second opinion. So he sent me to went to Kingsmill Hospital. Yeah. And they scanned me. And they said, you better. You're stopping in. And they whipped it off the following day. And I went to, then they sent for me, did me a scan and said, you've got it in your lungs as well.
What?
Yeah. And I thought, oh God, this is not good. So I said to my dad, I think I've got it in my lungs, I've got to go back. He says, well, don't worry, if you die, I'll look after the kids. I thought, well, thanks for that, Dad, that's really reassured me. That's my dad being blunt. And it turned out that it wasn't secondary tumours, it was dust from working down the pit. That's what it was. So, yeah, that was a tough time because I've got 2 little children living with me as well.
Did they know?
No, I told them I'd got a bad leg. So, but they know now, obviously.
Right, Lee, you are quite controversial.
Really?
Yeah, apparently. So I read.
Allegedly.
So I'm not particularly interested in going into the details of these issues, but
Go for
things like I'm not watching the England in the Euros final because the players have been taken the knee, or you can feed yourself on 30p. So without going into the specifics of the issues, do you ever think, gosh, I just wish sometimes I would pause, count to 10 before I... Are you a hothead and you say these things while you're being a hothead?
Well, let's start on the 30p meals. I set up a food a food project with my local food bank last year, probably 18 months ago, where we got a chef in and we cooked on a budget. As a matter of fact, the chef said to me he could feed a family of 5 on 50 quid a week, and I said, you're talking rubbish. So I challenged him, and we got the college involved. We got a film crew there, it's all been filmed. And I went to the Aldi and bought the ingredients, gave it to him. We did a ready, steady cook type event, and he actually cooked 170 odd meals for 50 quid, which worked out at 30 pence each.
Yeah.
And I thought...
And I suppose at 170 meals, that would be... Scale would be involved.
So the point was, and I tried to get lots of media attention. I think GBNews came up to film it as well, and nobody was interested. But as soon as I said it in the Commons, everybody was talking about it, and that's all I wanted. I wanted the whole country talking about it, because we have got young people now in this country who cannot cook a meal from scratch. And if they could, if we taught cooking in schools now and shown people how to budget and how to buy ingredients and cook from scratch, their money would go a lot further.
When you get a tirade of reaction, when you say some of the things, whether it's, and I gave those 2 examples about missing the Euros or the 30p example, does it hurt?
No. Just to put things into perspective, Gloria, when it all kicked off and I was getting a tough time in the Commons from some of the Labour MPs, I actually wrote to every single Labour MP to invite them to come up to Ashfield, to my food bank, to the food project, and have a go. Not one accepted. There's your answer. They don't want answers to solutions. They just want to score political points.
When you see men and women striking today, do you get, because of your experience and what happened in those former mining communities, do you think, I get that, I get why they're doing that?
It's different with the mining industry. Where I'm from, obviously, Uthwaite in Nottinghamshire, the coal mine, when it was open, was the whole community. It's not just about a coal mine. It's about the colliery's got a football team, it's got a cricket team, it's got a rugby team, it's got a social club. We've got tennis courts, we've got putting greens. Everything revolves around the pit being there. It's a full community. The community even police themselves. So when a coal mine does go in a small village like that, things just change overnight, and that's the bit that the Conservative Party at the time and Maggie didn't get. They didn't understand that you're just ripping the guts out of a complete community. And if you're going to do that, then you've got to replace it with something, and they didn't. And it's took us 30 odd years to get over that. People have got good jobs now and better standard of living and better houses, but it was the community thing for me. You know, people down here didn't quite get it, what you was taking away. You're not just taking away miners' jobs, you're taking away people's lives. But if you fast forward now, I look at some of the union leaders, I look at your Mick Lynch's of this world. I think he's a despicable man. I think we've just come through 2 years of hell with COVID, and we've now got a war in Ukraine, and you know the country should be coming together and uniting. We just lost our Queen, and what does he decide to do? He decides to try and hold the country to ransom again by having these strikes, which I don't support these strikes at all. I don't think the majority of people in Ashfield support these strikes. So I just think just help the country, get round the table, let's talk. Because at the end of the day, Gloria, most people in this country, even Labour Party voters, aren't some left-wing, rabid revolutionary who want to bring they just want a decent life, they want a decent wage, they want the kids to go to a decent school and a decent healthcare from the local hospital. That's all we want. It's not much.
Lee Anderson, always interesting talking to you when you were a Labour colleague. Still interesting to talk to you now you're a Conservative MP. Thank you.
And now we're friends.
Indeed.
And still decent. The word decent being used there quite a lot, which is quite right. Let's just update you the fact that the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate, have arrived in Northern Ireland visiting charities. They're supporting people from all backgrounds. So to let you know, we'll have the latest for you live. Cameron, our royal correspondent, is there for you. All the pictures coming up. Let's get an update, though, on the weather first.
I'm Alex Deacon with your latest weather updates. For many, a fine, bright day out there today. There's a fair bit of cloud across parts of south of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a few showers likely here. It's quite breezy as well, but not as windy as yesterday. Low pressure dominant to the north. High pressure, though, controlling things further south, which means much of southern England, South Wales, won't see many showers at all. Staying dry and bright here, and the same goes for much of eastern England and northeast Scotland. It's further north and west where we've got more cloud and some outbreaks of rain pushing into North Wales and northwest England, across Northern Ireland and parts of western Scotland. A mixture of sunshine and blustery showers across the far north. In the sunny spells further south, well, temperatures getting up into the high teens, 20 Celsius is just about possible. Generally, we're looking at 16 or 17 the high. Through this evening, I think we'll see a bit more rain just moving through the central belt of Scotland, so turning fairly damp here. In fact, right across Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of rain for much of the night. Could be quite heavy, especially through the early hours, and we'll see rain returning to Northern Ireland as well overnight. Again, much of England and Wales staying dry. A milder night than last night. Temperatures mostly holding up in double figures. On to the details for Friday, and we'll be watching this band of rain as it sinks south. It's going to be quite heavy, starting off across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, heading quite quickly into northern England, then into parts of Wales. Either side of that, reasonably bright skies and just a few showers. But as this sinks southwards, could turn into quite a lively line of heavy rain, not lasting too long, but intense rain and squally winds where they just suddenly pick up over parts of the Midlands, Lincolnshire, South Wales and southwest England come the afternoon. Eventually getting into East Anglia in the southeast for Friday evening's rush hour. M25 could see a lot of rain in a short space of time. Following on from that, we'll see plenty of showers packing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. Into the weekend, though, the showers fading. Many places looking dry on Saturday. We are expecting some rain on Sunday, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very warm welcome. It's 1 o'clock. You're watching GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. Liz Truss is in Prague for the inaugural summit of the European political community, where she's expected to call for European unity over migration and energy.
However, that summit likely to be dominated by differences over the gas prices to contain soaring energy costs, all driven, of course, by the war in Ukraine.
One of the key meetings the Prime Minister will have this evening is with the French President Emmanuel Macron, where the main talking point is expected to be the growing panel migrant crisis.
In other news, mortgage woes. The interest rate in a typical 2-year fixed rate now breaching 6%. First time in 14 years. What will it mean for the housing market? We'll have Liam Halligan running through the figures for us.
But now it's time for your latest news with Rhiannon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1:02, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Police in Thailand say at least 34 people have been killed, including 22 children, after a gunman opened fire at a childcare centre. It happened in the northeastern province of Nong Bua Lampu. Thai police say the gunman was a former officer. He was discharged from the police force last year and had appeared in court on drugs charges prior to opening fire. They've confirmed he killed himself, his wife and his child during the mass shooting. City of London Police says 3 people have been stabbed in an incident in Bishopsgate near Liverpool Street Station. Posting on social media, the force said the victims had been taken to hospital and their condition is not thought to be life-threatening. Police say the incident was a suspected robbery and are looking for 2 suspects. No arrests have been made. The force says the incident remains ongoing but isn't thought to be terror-related. The Prime Minister is at a summit in Prague today for an historic first meeting of a new political club of nations. Liz Truss will call for European unity and address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges. She'll say Europe is facing its biggest crisis since the Second World War following Russian aggression. Ms Truss would also hold talks with French President Emmanuel Macron in what could mark a new phase in the UK's post-Brexit relations with Europe. Hate crimes in England and Wales have increased by 26% in the last year, but police are prosecuting a small proportion of those offences. Official figures show there were over 155,000 hate crimes recorded by officers up to March this year. It's the biggest increase in hate crime in 5 years. But the number of offences resulting in a police charge are at 8% of the total recorded. The Royal College of Nursing is balloting its members for strike action for the first time in its 106-year history. Around 300,000 nurses will vote whether to walk out over pay. They're calling for an above-inflation increase. It's amid warnings that record numbers of nurses are leaving. The RCN's General Secretary says it's a once-in-a-generation chance to improve staff shortages and nurses' pay. The result of the ballot is due early next month. Meanwhile, around 500 emergency call handlers have joined a BT Group walkout today in a dispute over pay. The Communication Workers Union, which represents BT workers, had previously agreed to exempt 999 staff from the strike action. The CWU says the position has changed after widespread outrage at the company's refusal to negotiate. A further 3 days of walkouts are planned to take place later this month. The union's General Secretary Dave Ward told GB News BT are upping the ante.
I mean, it cannot be right that call centre workers earning between £21,000 and £27,000 a year are having to go on strike. They're at a tipping point. The actual situation with BT is that they are refusing to negotiate. They've had 2.5 weeks' notice of this dispute. We would rather be in a room sitting with them today trying to get this dispute resolved than being out on strike.
The Chancellor's meeting with UK banks and building societies today amid rising mortgage rates. Kwasi Kwarteng will attempt to calm executives ahead of his plans to loosen market regulation in financial services. A number of high street lenders, including HSBC, Santander and Virgin Money, have withdrawn products for new borrowers. That's after the mini-budget announcement last month. The typical rate for a 2-year fixed mortgage has risen above 6% for the first time in 14 years. In other news, at least 2 people have been killed in Ukraine's southern city of Zaporizhia. Ukrainian officials say Russian rockets hit residential buildings overnight. The southeastern city is one of the 4 Ukrainian regions annexed by Russia. Kyiv says it'll never accept the illegal seizure of its territory by force, which has been condemned by Ukraine's allies. Meanwhile, President Zelensky claims Ukraine's counter-offensive is continuing to gain ground as 3 more villages in the Kherson region have been liberated. At least 17 people, mostly women, have died after 2 boats sank in separate incidents in Greek waters. Dramatic footage shows some of those rescued being pulled up a cliff to safety. Coast Guards say 30 people are still missing from the 2 wrecks. It's understood 1 boat off the coast of Lesbos was carrying around 40 migrants when it sank in choppy waters overnight. 80 more were rescued from another boat which sank late on Wednesday near the island of Kythera. A search and rescue operation is ongoing. And Kevin Spacey is due to appear in a US court to face an allegation he sexually assaulted a boy 36 years ago. Actor Anthony Rapp claims he was the victim of an unwanted sexual advance at a party in 1986 when he was just 14 years old. The trial comes less than 3 months after the Oscar-winning actor appeared in a UK court where he faces a separate 5 charges of sexual assault. Mr. Spacey denies all of the accusations against him. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Mark and Gloria with GB Newsday.
Rhiannon, thanks very much indeed. So, Prime Minister Liz Truss now in Prague for the first meeting of the European political community. What's that? Well, she's attending a meeting of leaders from across Europe to reiterate her support for Ukraine, but also to push for collective action on energy security and migration. So, she'll be delivering what she says are the UK's priorities.
She'll later meet her foe or friend, President Macron, where she's expected to discuss the migrant crisis. Joining us now from Prague is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. I think her second outing on the world stage. Obviously, we're no longer in the European Union, but this is a meeting of European leaders. What's she hoping to say to the domestic audience here?
Yeah, really fascinating, isn't it, that she's actually made this visit in many ways, Gloria, to what is effectively the brainchild of Emmanuel Macron, the French president, who only a couple of months ago she was tossing up whether he was a friend or foe, though we're told by the Prime Minister that was just a bit of banter, and he's definitely a friend. This European political group, or the community as they're calling it, is a grouping beyond the European Union. So there are 27 member states of the European Union. This is actually 44 nations meeting. So it's not just the UK, it's places like Turkey and Norway and Azerbaijan and lots of the Western Balkan countries. Ukraine is part of it as well, though President Zelensky, unsurprisingly, is having to dial in rather than being physically here in person. 2 notable exceptions, that is Russia and Belarus. And in essence, this is a kind of summit for peace is how it's been branded, looking at kind of 3 main aspects where there is a genuine European cause, if you like, or a coordination and a need for deeper ties when it comes to energy security, supporting Ukraine during that war, and also on the issue of migration. And I think in many ways, Liz Truss' argument is, yes, I know you supported Brexit, and I did too, well, after the referendum at least anyway, and I get that you're a bit cautious about this kind of idea of another European body, if you like. But in the end, she says that when it comes to these big issues, they can only really be dealt with through cooperation, like migration, for example, and that she feels that if Britain is to be part of that, she wants to be there at the table. She wants to have her say, be heard, put across Britain's point of view. And I think that's really notable, really particularly on Ukraine, where there's been a very deliberate attempt, particularly by the British government, to build up this kind of Western alliance in support of President Zelensky, which clearly been much appreciated by them. And this is, in essence, an attempt to, again, present that very united front.
We may even get a meeting in London, inviting everyone back home for tea and toast and talks. I mean, it's very different mood music to the Johnson administration.
Yeah, I think it is. There's very deliberate attempts here to kind of reach out, if you like, to people on the continent. And again, maybe that's not a surprise. I mean, let's take the issue of migration, Mark. Good example. A couple of dozen people very sadly died trying to get to Lesbos in Greece in the last 24 hours or so. It is a reminder that the whole continent is grappling with this issue. Clearly, the people who end up on the north coast of France have come through Europe. If Liz Truss wants to sort out the small boats crisis, she needs the cooperation of other European countries, most particularly, of course, France. And that is why she's actually having a second meeting with Emmanuel Macron, because she did meet him in New York at that UN General Assembly just a couple of weeks ago. She's also meeting with Mark Rutte, the Netherlands Prime Minister, maybe even Ursula von der Leyen. And she's already had a meeting with the Czech Prime Minister where they talked about actually the strong agreement on the importance of trying to present that united front when it comes to democracies and Putin's brutality, but also trying to deal with those really important issues such as migration. So yes, it is a different approach, certainly a different sense of tone. It is with caution. I think they're trying to work out how today goes, and Liz Truss is only here until later on tonight, so it's, not a kind of full-blown thing. But clearly they're very keen, I think, on this idea of greater cooperation, hence why she's reached out that idea of hosting potentially another summit within 6 months in London. But as I say, I think today's a test to see how it all goes.
Darren, in a very picturesque Prague as ever, thanks very much indeed. Back to you, of course, as we get more. But let's reflect now that it was, a fairly sceptical response when the French President Macron first proposed this summit, which turned into some, curiosity, should we say?
More than 40 heads of states from different European countries are meeting in Prague to discuss what this is all about and, of course, to discuss what options there are for Macron and Liz Truss to agree some sort of deal on the migrant crisis is Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, French journalist for The Telegraph. Hello there. Hi, how are you? Thank you for joining us. I was just doing a quick search on the internet about how many times Priti Patel, when she was Home Secretary, had stood alongside her French counterpart, agreeing multi-million pounds deals. One headline from November last year, UK and France reach agreement to prevent 100% of channel crossings. Is there anything that could happen today to make words turn into action when it comes to the migrant crossings?
When it comes to the migrant crossing, and because at this summit you will have many countries that suffer from migration even much more than France and Britain, such as Greece and Italy and other countries in the Southern Balkans, I suspect that it's not going to be as granular as saying, OK, we're putting more money, we're securing more beaches. But I certainly think that it's something that Liz Truss will find in common with several countries that will say, in effect, we suffer from this. We have had a sort of lack of attention from Europe. We've had just camps sort of taking up some of our islands. And you also will have countries such as Sweden, whose government have turned precisely on issues such as migration. So I don't think Liz Truss is in such a bad position. I think things will come out of it, but it certainly brings sort of continent-wide validation from countries that are members of the EU and countries that are not members of the EU, and it makes the problem, again, a Europe-wide problem, which actually it is.
And what is the significance of that? As you say, clearly Liz Truss wanting to indicate she is still outside the EU, but looking for a European solution to this problem, and the whole instance of friend or foe and all that sort of built up previously with Macron. Is this, a real change of mood music?
I think, yes, you're quite right. There's a change of mood music, mostly because Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson did not understand one another, did not like one another. Each represented what the other hated most. To Macron, Boris Johnson was sort of a blustering Englishman who didn't prepare anything and sort of winged it every time. And this is something that Macron was a sort of very sort of top-down, organized French bureaucrat, and he was technically a member of the French civil service for a long time, longer than anything else, on the one hand, and Boris Johnson didn't like the sort of the arrogance, perceived arrogance, and the idea that everything was set in concrete from Macron, and both of them have a kind of different hubris, and it's very obvious that they clashed. I don't think it's only personal. I think there are different interests, and certainly Macron for a very long time pushed in the EU for the hardest possible line in the Brexit negotiations. I think Ukraine has changed everything. I think Emmanuel Macron has finally realized that he was essentially led by the nose by Vladimir Putin. He has also seen the horrifying news, of torture chambers and kidnapping of children and a number of things in Ukraine, which he has finally condemned in the harshest terms. And he is facing the reality of the war on the continent. He's also facing the reality of the economic crisis that's going to hit us. And I suspect that there is now a window of opportunity in which France and Britain could agree on a number of things, and they include those sore points like immigration, the Northern Irish border, for instance, etc. All of these things are possible because there needs to be a united Europe. Macron has heard all the accusation of France dividing Europe, France and Germany, and he's quite willing to leave Olaf Scholz as being the baddie on his own. And but he can see that. The other thing is, I think that he has now met twice with Liz Truss, and there's much more contact. It's easier between the two than it was with previous leaders. Liz Truss is a hardworking woman. One of the things that the French will note is that in every single ministry that she's been the head of, she never had problems with her civil service, and that that is proof of someone who actually works on her boxes, works on her what she's got to do. And there's more respect to somebody like that who's hardworking from the French than there would be otherwise.
Yeah, and of course she's been Foreign Secretary as well, which does tend to help. But Anne-Elizabeth Moutet from The Telegraph, thanks very much indeed for bringing us your reaction to what might be coming up in the next few hours. Thank you.
Back at home now, and more on the news that 3 people have been stabbed in Bishopsgate in East London, where we can cross over to now with our news correspondent, Rosie Wright. Rosie, we can see the police cordon. Just bring us up to date and tell us what happened this morning.
Good afternoon to you, Gloria. Yeah, there's a significant police presence in Bishopsgate, which is right in the heart of the financial district of London, and still a very significant police cordon you can see behind me. The scene has not yet been cleared. Police are investigating right now what they're calling a suspected robbery. What we believe happened, and having spoken to officers on the scene, is that at 9:46 this morning, the City of London police were called. They were then on the scene at 9:51. What police believe happened, they said this was sketchy details, was that someone had their phone, someone tried to steal someone's phone. Then members of the public intervened to, I guess, try to prevent the phone being stolen. The result of that was 4 people being injured. 3 people have been stabbed. They've been taken by London Ambulance Service to a nearby hospital. 1 other person was pushed to the floor. At this point, we don't know the identities of those people, so we don't know if the person who tried to have their phone stolen was one of those people injured, or if they were all just passers-by who tried to help. At this point, the police have made no arrests. They say there are 2 suspects. They want to make very clear there was an earlier arrest around this area, and people have been sharing a video of it online, believing that that purports to be to do with this crime. Police have clarified and said no, and no arrests have yet been made. They do believe there are 2 suspects. The other thing is they say this is not thought to be terror-related, something really to stress. So 2 key things at this point to remember: not terror-related. Please be aware of the information that you're seeing circulating online. The police have said no arrests have been made at this point. It's currently suspected robbery. As and when we get more details, obviously police are investigating. They believe this cordon will be up for maybe another hour or 2 more. When we get them, we'll bring them to you here.
But Rosie, just to ask you, first of all, obviously this is in the heart of the city's financial district. We've got Lloyd's of London just up the road. We've got Liverpool Street Station. Given that cordon we can see behind it, are people able to get away and to work in those offices?
There was initially significant disruption, but a lot of that is cleared. Passers-by can come through and traffic is flowing normally. You mentioned Lloyd's, that's right in front of me, and the Bank of England is just about 200 metres or so down there. It's a really busy interchange. Of course, actually, there's a lot of nervousness. People here are worried. You know, they've been coming out on their lunch break, hearing rumours of what's going around, and the scene is quite dramatic behind me. It hasn't been clear, but there's blood on the pavement, and there were initial rumours flying around. People thought maybe it was to do with a bike being stolen. The police have said no, they believe it was the phone that was being the target of the crime, not a bike. But obviously an unsettled move, but actually the flow through, although disrupted earlier this morning, hasn't been too significant in terms of disruption.
Yeah. Rosie, thanks very much indeed for updating us there at the scene. Thank you.
Coming up, we'll be speaking with a former nurse, as for the first time in its 106-year history, the Royal College of Nursing is balloting its members for strike action. But first, it's your weather.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. For many, a fine, bright day out there today. There's a fair bit of cloud across parts of south of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a few showers likely here. It's quite breezy as well, but not as windy as yesterday. Low pressure dominant to the north. High pressure, though, controlling things further south, which means much of southern England, South Wales, won't see many showers at all. Staying dry and bright here, and the same goes for much of eastern England and northeast Scotland. It's further north and west where we've got more cloud and some outbreaks of rain pushing into North Wales and northwest England, across Northern Ireland and parts of western Scotland. A mixture of sunshine and blustery showers across the far north. In the sunny spells further south, well, temperatures getting up into the high teens, 20 Celsius is just about possible. Generally, we're looking at 16 or 17 the high. Through this evening, I think we'll see a bit more rain just moving through the central belt of Scotland, so turning fairly damp here. In fact, right across Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of rain for much of the night. Could be quite heavy, especially through the early hours, and we'll see rain returning to Northern Ireland as well overnight. Again, much of England and Wales staying dry. A milder night than last night. Temperatures mostly holding up in double figures. On to the details for Friday, and we'll be watching this band of rain as it sinks south. It's going to be quite heavy, starting off across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, heading quite quickly into northern England, then into parts of Wales. Either side of that, reasonably bright skies and just a few showers. But as this sinks southwards, could turn into quite a lively line of heavy rain, not lasting too long, but intense rain and squally winds where they just suddenly pick up over parts of the Midlands, Lincolnshire, South Wales and southwest England come the afternoon. Eventually getting into East Anglia in the southeast for Friday evening's rush hour. The M25 could see a lot of rain in a short space of time. Following on from that, we'll see plenty of showers packing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. Into the weekend, though, the showers fading. Many places looking dry on Saturday. We are expecting some rain on Sunday, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
So we've had the strikes on the trains, post office, GPO workers, and now it's nurses, perhaps, because the Royal College of Nursing balloting its members for strike action. The first time it says it's done so in its 106-year history.
Around 300,000 nurses will vote on whether to walk out over pay. They're calling for a rise of 5% above inflation increase.
It also comes amid their warnings that record numbers of nurses are actually leaving the NHS. The RCN's General Secretary saying the only way to prevent nurses leaving is to pay them a decent wage.
The result of the ballot is due next month. Joining us now is Helen O'Connor, who's a former nurse and NHS union organiser. Helen, you're a former nurse. When did you leave and why?
So I left the NHS in 2018. One of the reasons I left is because the wages, terms and conditions were falling. That was due to years of either no pay rises or very, very low, just over 1% pay rises. So what happened was the value of the pay dropped down, and clinical staff have lost up to 16% of their pay over the last 10 years. This is why people are leaving. So last year, 40,000 nurses have left the NHS. That's the equivalent of one in 9 of the entire workforce. So there's a serious retention and recruitment crisis going on at the moment. What we've also seen is the student nurse bursary has been stopped. So now student nurses are amassing a lot of debt to train, and there's a 1 in 3 rate dropout amongst the student nurses. We know the government are trying to encourage retired staff to come back, and also they're talking about bringing in volunteers. But the problem with that plan is that it won't cover the rate at which people are leaving. And also, if you're bringing in volunteers, you're talking about people with no training. And we do need highly skilled, experienced staff in the NHS because they're the staff who know what they're doing. They're the staff who keep people safe. So when staff leave the NHS, conditions become very unsafe for patients, and you get a rise in premature deaths, serious untoward incidents, etc. So the question of pay is inextricably linked to patient care. And what needs to happen is the pay needs to be in line with inflation, because even NHS trusts themselves are now recognising that their staff are finding it very, very difficult to cope. And they're actually signposting their staff to charities, which we think is unacceptable.
Those trusts, of course, have said that nurses got a 3% deal last year when many other public sector workers didn't. Not to say, of course, that they don't deserve yet more this time. But given that, do you believe they're going to dig their heels in?
Well, we don't know the results of the ballot yet. My union, GMB Union, is also running an indicative ballot at the moment. As a member-led democratic trade union, we listen to the voices of our members. The results are very important. We're bound by legislation. We'll have to get a minimum of a 50% turnout, and 40% of those people will have to vote yes. But from the soundings I'm taking from staff, they are very angry. They're angry that their pay is very, very low, and also their workplace conditions are getting very difficult. A lot of people are just struggling with impossible conditions now. We're already hearing about nurses skipping their breaks, working for free just to cover the shortfall with sickness levels and with vacancies. So
Helen, patients will be angry if they have their operations cancelled, though, due to strike actions. There's already so big backlogs in existence over elective
just to see on that
surgery.
point, because that's a very important point. So when NHS staff strike, there is Christmas Day cover. So life and limb cover, so things are safe, and the unions negotiate that cover with the employers. So it would never be the case that patients would be left with absolutely nobody looking after them. So like I said, It's Christmas Day cover. So we would advise everybody to engage in the strike ballot. We definitely want our members to vote and have their say on their pay and what's going on. And the other point I'd like to make is the NHS has suffered years and years of cutbacks. So I don't know what nurses are expected to do now. Are they expected to sit there and put up with more cuts that are actually harming their patients? And increasing numbers of nurses can see that the cutbacks are harming their patients. So nurses really are left with very little choice now but to engage with the unions and try and fight back. And I'd advise any clinical staff member out there to join a union, join a good union like my trade union, GMB. They can join online, www.gmb.org.
Yeah, well, we won't go down that route because this is not a free advert for you to encourage union membership. People can make that decision themselves. But let's dial back to what we heard from the new Health Secretary, Therese Coffey, where she indicated that an answer may be to bring workers in from abroad. Has that been part of the problem in that we were staffed with quite a few overseas workers coming in, particularly on the nursing front? Has that been a problem in terms of the nursing numbers?
Well, absolutely not. I mean, I'm an overseas worker. I came over from Ireland to start my nurse training, and I have to say that about 70% of my set at the time are Irish nurses. And it's the overseas nurses, in fact, who've been the backbone of the NHS and who've held up the NHS for many, many years. And many of the people I've trained with are actually still in roles in the NHS to this day. And without them, things would be very, very unsafe indeed. So I don't think it's the fact that overseas staff are the problem here. I think that cuts and privatisation are the problem here, and the fact that wages, terms and conditions have been driven down over many, many years.
Yeah, the point I was trying to make was, do you think that the government will have to rethink its policies on migration to get these key workers back into the country?
So, you know, there is a need to recruit people and train people and retain existing staff. And I think it will take that there's a raft of measures. It's not as simple as just changing the immigration policies. Of course, we want free movement, but there's a whole host of other things. Improving and investing in the wages, terms and conditions of staff is so important. That's what we would say as a trade union. That's what needs to happen, because you need to retain the experienced people who are already in the NHS as well, because they're leaving. So
OK, Helen O'Connor, thank you very much indeed for joining us and outlining the situation. Thank you for your time.
The time is 1:32. It is time for your news update.
It's 1:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. At least 38 people have been killed, including 22 children, some as young as 2, after a gunman opened fire at a childcare centre in Thailand. The shooting happened in the northeastern province of Nong Bua Lampu. Thai police say the gunman was a former officer discharged from the police force last year. He'd appeared in court on drugs charges just hours before the attack. Police have confirmed he killed himself, his wife and his child during the mass shooting. City of London Police says 3 people have been stabbed in an incident in Bishopsgate near Liverpool Street Station. The force said the victims have been taken to hospital and their condition isn't thought to be life-threatening. The incident happened at around 9:45 this morning. Police are treating the incident as a suspected robbery and are looking for 2 suspects. No arrests have yet been made. The Prime Minister is at a summit in Prague for an historic first meeting of a new political club of nations. Liz Truss will call for European unity and address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges. She'll say Europe is facing its biggest crisis since the Second World War following Russian aggression. Liz Truss will also hold talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron in what could mark a new phase in the UK's post-Brexit relations with Europe. The Royal College of Nursing is balloting its members for strike action for the first time in its 106-year history. Around 300,000 nurses will vote whether to walk out over pay. They're demanding an above-inflation increase. The RCN's General Secretary says it's a once-in-a-generation chance to improve staff shortages and nurses' pay. The result of the ballot is due early next month. That as around 500 emergency call handlers are set to join a BT Group walkout today. The Communication Workers Union, which represents BT workers, had previously agreed to exempt 999 staff from the strike action. The CWU said the position had changed after widespread outrage at the company's refusal to negotiate. Further walkouts are planned later this month. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark and Gloria will be back in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. The time is 1:37. High Street banks and mortgage lenders will be meeting Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng to discuss the impact of recent financial market turmoil on the mortgage market.
As we've been reporting, rates soaring. The rate on a typical two-year fixed mortgage now breaching 6%. That's for the first time in 14 years, according to financial information service Moneyfacts.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said mortgages are rising as a direct result of the government's kamikaze mini-budget last month. Well, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, joins us now with On the Money.
Can we have a mortgage then?
Keir Starmer's words there, putting the blame for rising mortgage rates directly at Downing Street's door. Does that hold true?
No. Disingenuous, to say the least, but not surprising, because that's what politicians do, and I don't blame him. He's the leader of the opposition. And I think this mini-budget was certainly the spark that led to rising borrowing costs in sort of wholesale money markets, if you like, that led to the spark in a fall in the pound, which increases inflation by making imports more expensive and so on. But it was by no means the underlying cause. The underlying cause of this is that interest rates across the world are
not
going
like ours.
up. Well, interest rates in America have gone up a lot more than they have here in the UK. So interest rates in the UK are actually quite low by international standards. But they're going up everywhere because we're moving away from 10, 15 years of sort of zombie economics of ultra-low interest rates and lots of money printing. But Keir Starmer is well within its rights, and I would do the same if I was leader of the opposition, to highlight that the way the government has handled the economy since it came into office, the chaos really surrounding the mini-budget, the mixed messaging about when they're going to release their fiscal plan for the Office of Budget Responsibility. I mean, all this kind of lack of grip, it certainly aggravated what's happened on financial markets. But the reality is the pound is now above where it was before the mini-budget, and borrowing costs are slightly up on where they were before the mini-budget, but that's part of a long-term upward trend.
And they've been pricing in, obviously, what's expected to happen with the Bank of England, that they will put rates up when they meet next time in November. And it could be a fairly hefty increase as well to choke off inflation, which is their duty.
I know that's the wide perception that the money markets follow the Bank of England. It's actually the other way around. The money markets have a lot more power than the Bank of England, a lot more power than any politician anywhere, frankly, when it comes to the pricing of financial assets. I wouldn't want to overstate that.
Swaps, they call it.
And I don't want to be glib about it. That is just life. That's the way it is. And the Bank of England, in particular, among central banks around the world, is playing catch-up because it's been so slow, in my view. They would reject this to understand what's happening and so slow to acknowledge that we are in the middle of a long-term rise in inflation, partly because of lockdown, all those supply chain issues, partly because of the war in Ukraine. That hasn't helped commodity prices, has it? but it's a much more bigger, powerful force than that, which is, as I say, the retreat away from a world of ultra-loose money, ultra-low interest rates, to a more normal world, frankly. You know, it's not normal for interest rates to be 0.1 or 1 or 2%.
I remember my mortgage being 11% at one time in the 80s.
Now, that's a really important point, Mark, because you and I, we're of a certain vintage, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we remember interest rates at that point. But this is the thing, because with interest rates now at 6%, which sounds really low when we were lads, mortgage affordability, the share of your income you're spending on your mortgage, which is what really counts, given that people have bought houses at such elevated prices, mortgage affordability or unaffordability is now where it was back in 1988. On average, mortgaged homes were spending 32% of their take-home pay on their mortgage in the late 80s, and at 6%, it's about the same.
Yeah, 2.5 times salary was I remember, was the limit you could
And
borrow.
Liz Truss, whenever she's asked about this, she says, this has nothing to do with me. This is to do with the Bank of England. But I put it to you that if you have just found your dream home and you had a mortgage offer, which has since been withdrawn and reoffered at a much higher rate, or if your variable rate or your fixed rate is coming to an end, and you may have, some people will have to sell their homes because they can't afford to keep mortgage rates at paying a mortgage at an increased rate. They're not going to say, I'm so furious with the Bank of England, are they?
They're not, Gloria, and to be honest with you, this is why I'm an economics journalist. This is why I bang my head against the wall and have done throughout my whole career to try and get this stuff on telly, because it's so important. If you've lost a mortgage offer, you know, this is the kind of thing, I don't want to overstate this, you know, this really impacts people's mental health. This impacts relationships. This impacts marriages. This causes businesses to fail. This causes people's lives to be materially worse because of weird stuff happening in the money markets, gilt yields and swaps, stuff they don't understand. It is our duty to explain what is happening, to take the time and space on television to explain what is happening so people understand. And it's the duty of politicians to explain what is happening. And at the moment, I don't think they are.
And given that, and what could well happen to the economy in this coming year, next year, still talk about recession, or at least flatlining, I think was how the OECD talked about it. Could that mean that the bank actually starts cutting rates at some time to actually try and get the economy moving again, that things will have gone too far the other way?
I don't think that would happen. I mean, look, if they're... I'm in, you know, a lot of people follow my financial commentary, right? I've got to be careful what I say on television. But I think there is a sense that asset prices are really overvalued. Shares, bonds, and so on. Housing in some parts of the country, not in others. And so there may be some kind of what we call rather euphemistically a correction. It's such a clean, clinical phrase, but underneath that correction are all the human things that I was just discussing there with Gloria, all that pain. That could happen. If that happened, then I think there could be a retrenchment back to emergency interest rates. But the best thing for the country is that, you know, don't shoot the messenger. Economists like me are known as dismal scientists. But the best move for the country, the best outcome for the country would be a hopefully gradual but steady increase in interest rates. So interest rates are higher than the rate of inflation. Currently, interest rates are way lower than the rate of inflation. When interest rates are higher than the rate of inflation, people with savings get a real return on those savings. Investment decisions start to make sense. You start to get growth again. For me, Liz Truss's supply-side policies, they're really important. The most important thing for getting growth back is to regulate and normalise our interest rates and our inflation rate, because it all stems from there.
Yeah, OK.
Cheers, Liam. As ever, you'll take us to a brighter day one day. I think
Sunlit uplands, I think Boris Johnson used to call it.
We'll be able to afford going, you know, buying a pint of milk again. Right, back to politics. The Tory party conference ended yesterday. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, she had some bumpy moments, but her speech went down reasonably well. Today she's in Prague for the European policy community, political community. The split in the government was palpable at that conference, as senior cabinet members such as Penny Mordaunt or big figures in the party, Lord Frost, who spoke to GB News, called on the Prime Minister for benefits to be raised in line with prices, not wages. Well, this morning we spoke to party chairman Jake Berry, and here is what he said on the matter.
Well, dealing very directly with pensioners, you, I'm sure, are aware that both in terms of disability benefits and, in fact, pensions, it's a statutory requirement that those are increased in line with inflation. But those inflation figures for all benefits are the autumn inflation figures. I believe that the government should work in facts rather than sort of crystal ball gazing. We will know later on in this quarter what those figures are, and when those figures arrive, it is absolutely usual, and it's happened in every government, including Labour governments and governments for decades, that the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions and the Chancellor make a decision on what they are going to do with benefits like universal credit. That decision then comes to the Cabinet. But in truth, you're asking me to comment on, why haven't we made a decision? Well, the truth is we don't actually have the facts. We don't know what the inflation figure is, so we can't make a decision until that information is received.
So that's the domestic front, but the Prime Minister off to Prague to meet all those other European leaders. Has she managed to leave her troubles behind her? Joining us, political reporter Catherine Forster. I mean, she was Foreign Secretary, so she'd been used to these sort of things before, but this might be a little relief for her to get out of the country and go somewhere else and be seen as an international statesman.
I think she will be enjoying this opportunity, won't she, to be striding across the world stage with these world leaders that are treating her rather more friendlily. It's not even a word, is it? You know what I mean.
I like
warmly. Treating her more warmly than many of her own party.
Yeah.
And I think it will be a bit of a blessed relief.
I think we're just getting some pictures in shortly of them all meeting up, because there will be... Oh, here we go. Lots of men in suits.
There's a woman. There's a
couple of women. The picture everyone wants to see, though, is what's going to happen when Liz Truss shakes hand or not with a certain Emmanuel Macron, and will they be friends or foes?
Wasn't it bizarre during the leadership campaign that she was asked friend or foe and she said the jury's out, and now she's apparently said...
there's Monsieur Macron.
It was a bit of banter, but... as Darren was saying earlier, there was some talk that they were ready to do some sort of deal on migration that was then scrapped at that point. So clearly, now that she is Prime Minister, she will be looking to strike a much more emollient
Yeah, I hope she's there. We haven't seen her yet, so maybe she's a bit late, I don't know.
Catherine.
Oh, right, Ursula von der Leyen.
How is she going to calm her party? Parliament is back on Tuesday. It's rarely been sitting since, July, really. But she's got to reinstil discipline when those Tory MPs come back. I mean, Nadine Dorries today, from the right of the party, big Boris Johnson supporter, but being incredibly critical.
It just never ends, does it? I think it will be incredibly difficult next week. Obviously, they are now away from conference. They're not all together. They're not speaking at fringe events, saying whatever comes into their head. But clearly, she is going to need to get a grip of discipline. As you say, Nadine Dorries. Now, Nadine Dorries, obviously not in the cabinet now.
We've just seen her. She's at the back, on the left-hand side, near the exit.
And these things are very political, aren't they? But they're very political. The sort of position that you get in these photographs is political in itself. I mean, you'd want to be at the front, wouldn't you?
Or at least in the middle, maybe, with the other big powers, Germany, France, and so on. But because this is not an EU gathering, let's explain that to viewers and listeners.
So there's 44 states there, including Turkey, Balkan states. It is the EU plus all countries in Europe, basically.
Yes.
And it is President Macron's baby. Fundamentally, this European political community that he wants to bring all of the countries of Europe together, whether they're in the EU or whether they're not, and to work towards unity, obviously over Ukraine, obviously to do with energy security. And it's a good opportunity, obviously, if you've got 44 leaders together, how much you're going to decide. But to the side of that, there'll be one-on-ones, and it's a great opportunity for Liz Truss to build some bridges and look statesman-like.
Yeah, and an interesting tweet that she put out, Europe is facing its biggest crisis since the Second World War. With unity and resolve. And clearly she's talking specifically about Ukraine. But are they, and the President Erdogan of Turkey there, of course, who's central in this sort of bridge, if you like, with Russia or not, that it's brought them together in a way that perhaps we wouldn't have expected even 6 months ago?
It has, hasn't it? Because for a long time, after the Brexit referendum, it seemed to be all about divisions specifically between the EU and us and the battleground there and wrangling and arguing about that. But of course, we've got a much bigger problem in Vladimir Putin and what has happened with the invasion of Ukraine. And that really has united Europe, although fair to say there are concerns obviously going forward, especially with energy supply and the possibility of rationing, possibility of blackouts, whether that unity might fracture down the line.
And the difficulty with these sorts of events is they're often described as talking shops. Very little resolution, a chance to meet, although some people might say, did we learn nothing from Zoom? But a chance to get together face to face, but actual resolution, concrete resolutions to come out of these things. Warm words, yes, but anything that might impact on our lives and improve them.
Well, I think she will be looking to be talking to President Macron, probably, you know, even if it's just informally, because clearly the government need to do something urgently about small boats crossing the channel.
But I was just checking last year. I was just looking at this. How much money taxpayers paid when Priti Patel was Home Secretary to do that deal with... There is already a deal. It didn't work.
Oh, there's a vast amount of money. Yes. A vast amount of money been spent. And I was at a fringe event the other day. Priti Patel, former Home Secretary, was talking about Rwanda. She was saying, I'm absolutely confident it's going to work. Suella Braverman, the new Home Secretary, was saying that what she dreams of is the front page of the Telegraph picture with a plane taking off full of illegal migrants who've been shipped off to Rwanda. And of course, she's now planning to take an even harder line and say, if you come illegally, you have zero chance of claiming asylum. But of course, will she be able to get this through? And again, Suella Braverman, who obviously ran for the leadership, divisions, although she's in cabinet, she has been freelancing a bit, hasn't she? She's saying, well, I was happy with the 45p tax cut. Why did they go back on it? Also, she's been expressing reservations about a trade deal with India. The Prime Minister is very keen to get that through by Diwali, I think. And Suella Braverman is saying, people coming from India tend to be the worst overstayers on the visa. So there's lots of division
President
at
Macron
home.
gone, yeah, I mean, big talking shop, lots of little discussions going on here and there. I haven't seen Liz Truss able to talk to anyone at the moment, but clearly there's a question mark as to the price that these other leaders may try and extract from Britain to actually engage, and that is the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was central to a lot of the stresses and strains to do with our new relationship with Europe.
Sure, but at least they are talking again, aren't they? Which is progress. And the noises coming from both sides are positive. There's been a softening. The Irish Deputy Prime Minister has been saying that maybe they'd been a little too strict with the way it had been enforced. Steve Baker, obviously, who's from the ERG and very hard line on this, was saying perhaps the way we dealt with this wasn't always the best way.
Well, actually apologised, didn't he? It's a sort of more or less.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary. So it seems to be that the mood music has changed from, oh, we're going to trigger Article 16 if you don't give us what we want, to we really want to do a deal, and we're hearing that on both sides. So, I mean...
Catherine, just to talk about opinion polls, there have been a number coming out in recent days. I hate to put you on the spot because there's no reason why you'd be across all of them, but a flavour. Oh, I don't expect the exact numbers. I mean, you can.
The latest one, 25 points behind Labour, 28 points behind Labour. The worst one was last week, 33 points.
I don't know if you saw this, the Scottish poll
and
as well last night.
Drop in support.
12% the Conservatives in in that YouGov poll in Scotland.
So she is even more unpopular. Who would have thought it was possible in Scotland than Boris Johnson? Because Boris Johnson Liz Truss, sorry, the Prime Minister should have said. Boris Johnson was really perceived as being toxic in Scotland. A lot of the Scottish absolutely loathed him. But it seems, judging by the fact that Scottish Labour support is improving, but Scottish Conservative support has really fallen through the floor, that so far what they see of Liz Truss, they like even less.
Well, and Conservative support for Truss overall. This is the latest that we've got from, I think it's YouGov polling, talking about the personal ratings, if you like. This is going back to 2019, 55% having a positive view of Liz Truss, 32% regarding her unfavourably. It's now 30% with a positive view, 60% with an unfavourable view. Similarly for Kwasi Kwarteng, his favourability has fallen to minus 54 points.
Yes, and in the case of Liz Truss, those favourability ratings are even worse than Boris Johnson shortly before he resigned.
And I think Jeremy Corbyn's
as well. Yes. So she has managed in the space of 4.5 weeks. I know the speech went down well in the hall and the members loved her and they were buoyed up by what she said. And I think she did steady the ship to an extent.
Yeah.
But so far, the public are unimpressed.
But perhaps she can turn it around. There's no certainties in politics.
Absolutely.
But it's not great at the moment, but, you know, she's only been a month in the job. Your views on the politics... Oh, no, not your views on the politics of the day. We will read out some of your emails. Thank you to all of you for getting in touch with us.
Yeah, we'll carry on with GB Views at gbnews.uk. Maybe we've got to censor some of your views, I don't know. Anyway, we'll have a taste for you. Coming up, we'll have the latest from Prague, but let's get an update on the weather now.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. For many, a fine, bright day out there today. There's a fair bit of cloud across parts of south of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a few showers likely here. It's quite breezy as well, but not as windy as yesterday. Low pressure dominant to the north. High pressure, though, controlling things further south, which means much of southern England, South Wales, won't see many showers at all. Staying dry and bright here, and the same goes for much of eastern England and northeast Scotland. It's further north and west where we've got more cloud and some outbreaks of rain pushing into North Wales and northwest England, across Northern Ireland and parts of western Scotland. A mixture of sunshine and blustery showers across the far north. In the sunny spells further south, well, temperatures getting up into the high teens, 20 Celsius. Is just about possible. Generally, we're looking at 16 or 17 the high. Through this evening, I think we'll see a bit more rain just moving through the central belt of Scotland, so turning fairly damp here. In fact, right across Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of rain for much of the night. Could be quite heavy, especially through the early hours, and we'll see rain returning to Northern Ireland as well overnight. Again, much of England and Wales staying dry. A milder night than last night. Temperatures mostly holding up in double figures. On to the details for Friday, and we'll be watching this band of rain as it sinks south. It's going to be quite heavy, starting off across southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, heading quite quickly into northern England, then into parts of Wales. Either side of that, reasonably bright skies and just a few showers. But as this sinks southwards, could turn into quite a lively line of heavy rain, not lasting too long, but intense rain and squally winds where they just suddenly pick up over parts of the Midlands, Lincolnshire, South Wales and southwest England come the afternoon. Eventually getting into East Anglia in the southeast for Friday evening's rush hour. M25 could see a lot of rain in a short space of time. Following on from that, we'll see plenty of showers packing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. Into the weekend, though, the showers fading. Many places looking dry on Saturday. We are expecting some rain on Sunday, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello, the time is 2 o'clock. You're watching GB Newsday with me, Gloria De Piero, and Mark Longhurst.
Yes, with Liz Truss in Prague for the inaugural summit of the European political community. Well, she's expected to call for European unity over energy and migration. That summit expected to be dominated by the differences on how to contain soaring energy costs, all driven, of course, by Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Also on the agenda for the Prime Minister is a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron with a discussion about the Channel migrant crisis. We'll speak with a French-based journalist about what the future holds for UK-French relations.
Also coming up, we'll be having the latest on mortgages and the housing market, and a warning just emerging that we could indeed be facing energy blackouts this winter. The latest coming up with Liam Halligan, our business and economics editor. Before that, though, latest news headlines with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 2. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. At least 38 people have been killed, including 22 children, some as young as 2, after a gunman opened fire at a childcare centre in Thailand. It happened in the northeastern province of Nong Bua Lampu. Thai police say the gunman was a former officer. He was discharged from the force last year and had appeared in court on drugs charges just hours before the shooting. They've also confirmed he killed himself, his wife and his child during the mass shooting. City of London Police says 3 people have been stabbed in an incident in Bishopsgate near Liverpool Street Station. The force says victims have been taken to hospital and their condition aren't thought to be life-threatening. It's confirmed the incident was a suspected robbery. Police are still looking for 2 suspects. No arrests have yet been made. The Prime Minister is at a summit in Prague today for an historic first meeting of a new political club of nations. Liz Truss will call for European unity and address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges. She's expected to say Europe is facing its biggest crisis since the Second World War following Russian aggression. Ms Truss will also hold talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron in what could mark a new phase in the UK's post-Brexit relations with Europe. Hate crimes in England and Wales have increased by 26% in the last year, but police are prosecuting a small proportion of those offences. Official figures show there were over 155,000 hate crimes recorded by officers up to March this year. It's the biggest increase in hate crimes in 5 years, but the number of offences resulting in a police charge are at 8% of the total recorded. The Royal College of Nursing is balloting its members for strike action for the first time in its 106-year history. Around 300,000 nurses will vote whether to walk out over pay. They're calling for an above-inflation increase. It's amid warnings that record numbers of nurses are leaving. The RCN's General Secretary says it's a once-in-a-generation chance to improve staff shortages and nurses' pay. The result of the ballot is due early next month. That is around 500 emergency call handlers have joined a BT Group walkout today in a dispute over pay. The Communication Workers Union, which represents BT workers, had previously agreed to exempt 999 staff from strike action. The CWU says the position has changed after widespread outrage at the company's refusal to negotiate. A further 3 days of walkouts are planned to take place later this month. The union's General Secretary Dave Ward told GB News BT are upping the ante.
I mean, it cannot be right that call centre workers earning between £21,000 and £27,000 a year are having to go on strike. They're at a tipping point. The actual situation with BT is that they are refusing to negotiate. They've had 2.5 weeks' notice of this dispute. We would rather be in a room sitting with them today trying to get this dispute resolved than being out on strike.
The Chancellor's meeting with UK banks and building societies today amid rising mortgage rates. Kwasi Kwarteng will attempt to calm executives ahead of his plans to loosen market regulation in financial services. A number of high street lenders, including HSBC, Santander and Virgin Money, have withdrawn products for new borrowers. That's after the mini-budget announcement last month. The typical rate for a 2-year fixed mortgage has risen above 6% for the first time in 14 years. In other news, at least 2 people have been killed in Ukraine's city of Zaporizhia in the south. Ukrainian officials say Russian rockets hit residential buildings overnight. The city is one of 4 Ukrainian regions annexed by Russia. Kyiv says it'll never accept the illegal seizure of its territory by force, which has been condemned by Ukraine's allies. Meanwhile, President Zelensky claims Ukraine's counteroffensive is continuing to gain ground as 3 more villages in the Kherson region have been liberated. At least 17 people, mostly women, have died after 2 boats sank in separate incidents in Greek waters. Dramatic footage shows some of those rescued being pulled up a cliff to safety. Coast Guards say 30 people are still missing from the 2 wrecks. It's understood 1 boat off the coast of Lesbos was carrying around 40 migrants when it sank in choppy waters overnight. 80 more were rescued from another boat, which sank late on Wednesday near the island of Kythera. A search and rescue operation is still going on. And Kevin Spacey is due to appear in a US court to face an allegation he sexually assaulted a boy 36 years ago. Actor Anthony Rapp claims he was the victim of an unwanted sexual advance at a party in 1986 when he was 14 years old. The trial comes less than 3 months after the Oscar-winning actor appeared in a UK court where he faces a separate 5 charges of sexual assault. Mr. Spacey denies all of the accusations against him. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Mark and Gloria.
Rhiannon, thanks very much indeed. So let's bring you more on that breaking news. The first official warning that we could be heading for blackouts this winter. This is coming from the National Grid, or the Electricity System Operating section of that. It says that the first blackouts could hit parts of the country if, and it is an if, the power plants can't get enough gas to keep those power plants running. So it could be that we're getting 3-hour blackouts to actually try and save energy if we can't use or save enough by using energy during off-peak times, it's warning. Also that businesses could face those planned 3-hour outages to ensure that the grid does not collapse, is the word that they've used.
The National Grid have also said they've described the prospect of insufficient gas supplies as unlikely before you all start panicking, but says the winter is likely to be challenging and it does need to be prepared, and we'll be talking more about that with Liam Halligan in this hour. Just to outline some details, that we're being told that the different parts of the country will actually get an advance notification a day in advance of these 3-hour blocks during which power will be cut off to try and reduce total consumption, says the National Grid, by 5%. So no need to panic quite yet, but you might want to get your extra jumpers ready just in case. And we'll be discussing it further in this hour. But for now, Prime Minister Liz Truss, she is in Prague for the first summit of the European political community. She's due to hold a number of meetings with different European leaders where she will reiterate the support for Ukraine and push for collective action on energy security and migration. Well, she'll also be meeting, will there be another handshake, we wonder, friend or foe President Macron, expected to discuss the migrant crisis with the French leader. Joining us now from Prague is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, what is our Prime Minister hoping to achieve? What does she want us to hear back home from that summit?
Well, really interesting. Let's start talking about energy security. As you say, that report from essentially the National Grid coming out in the last couple of minutes, warning in the worst case scenario, effectively, that there could be these power cuts. They say it's unlikely. The base case scenario is that homes will face no problems at all, though clearly it is a scenario that they are looking at. And Liz Truss would argue she is here today to ensure that what potentially could happen this winter will never happen again, in the sense that energy security is a big, big issue, clearly not just for the UK, but indeed essentially for all of Europe, given the actions we've seen Russia take over the last 6 months or so. Really interesting, of course, the Norwegians are here. They're massive energy suppliers, and there is talk about trying to sign long-term deals with the Norwegians. So again, there is not that possibility that power plants might effectively run out or have to curb energy supplies like they may have to do this winter. Keep saying let's not warn or get people too fearful about this. They're saying this is pretty unlikely, but it is possible. And so that's Liz Truss' kind of argument about why she's here today. She would argue that she is here to cooperate with her European neighbours, our European neighbours, on some kind of big global issues that we actually all agree on, whether that is on what's happening in Ukraine and the necessity to keep supporting President Zelensky, who, by the way, is dialing into this conference, Belarus and Russia uninvited, unsurprisingly, whether it's on the issue of migration, again, an issue that the whole of Europe has grappled with for at least the past decade in quite a big scale, or this issue of energy security, because talk about blackouts and difficulties with supply is not just confined to the United Kingdom. It's something that Germany, Spain, France and others are also having to look at this winter. So in the end, that is Liz Truss' big argument. She essentially says that she doesn't want this to turn into a new EU plus, if you like, but what she does want is political cooperation on those big, big issues.
As you were saying, some controversy about how Germany's handling the issue, this energy crisis, and questions about what we may be paying for our gas contracts, as you were saying, with the Norwegians and others. Suggestions we may be paying or doing a deal at the top of the market at the moment, at the highest price.
Well, that's clearly the problem, isn't it? You know, because we're not the only country wanting or needing energy. So energy prices are obviously historically high, though we have seen a fall in gas, actually, in recent days, but they are historically high, and the UK has to make a decision about whether it wants to sign those very expensive long-term contracts, or whether it tries and waits and hope things settle down. But there are potentially, at least in the short term, little sense that that's going to happen, given the fact that there is a scramble for supply. I mean, fascinating, isn't it? You listen to what's happened in Saudi Arabia in the last couple of days about them reducing oil production, the United States potentially going to Venezuela, who have been under sanctions for the last couple of years, to try and reach a deal to ease that as well. You know, all countries effectively are having to make pretty messy, pretty complicated, pretty difficult deals at the moment to try and get through this winter and indeed into the next couple of years. Because you have to remember, the government's energy price cap freeze is for 2 years. That is a sign that they think that this disruption is not going to simply come to an end when we get in to next spring. But it's, as I say, it is an attempt for Europe in many ways to try and grapple with this together, because our energy supply is interconnected. We do rely on the Norwegians and indeed on the French and others for electricity. Ireland, for example, relies on us. So in that interconnected world, her argument is, in that building behind me, it's better that she's sitting down talking, putting forward Britain's position in those conversations with European leaders. As you say, she's already had a bilateral with the Czech Prime Minister a little bit earlier on today. She's having a roundtable meeting at the moment with a family photograph a little bit earlier on, somewhat on the sidelines, but she has been having, it seems, quite jovial conversations with the Dutch Prime Minister, who she's also going to meet later, with the Irish Prime Minister, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin, and also she is going to have this kind of dinner, if you like, later on tonight in a closed room where the leaders themselves will have a chance to talk kind of privately with each other. And aside from those big issues that we talked about, energy security, migration, and that issue of Ukraine, on the sidelines, and I say this, on the sidelines, there may well be kind of talks and movement and suggestions around this Northern Irish Protocol issue as well, because just like the mood music has turned somewhat on our kind of relationship with our continental friends in Europe, it has also on this issue of trying to get a deal to deal with that Irish border issue. And there has been quite optimistic tones and noises coming from not just inside government in the UK, but also from the Irish government. So a lot of politics today. It's a pretty short meeting though. It's all going to end tonight. She's going to fly home this evening while EU stay on here. But she is testing the water, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, didn't we? Suggestions that she, well, more than a suggestion, she has effectively offered to host the next summit in London on the basis that this one goes well.
And just referring to that family photo that you raised, Liz Truss was at the back of that family photo. These things are very political, aren't they? Do you think there's a sense that there could be a sort of two-tier Europe with those who are still in the European Union having more influence than those who have left? Or would they like us to feel like we're in that position?
It's a really big political question, Gloria, if I can say. What clearly Liz Truss doesn't want to see is kind of some type of two-tier Europe where you also still have a kind of overall governing body. The idea about this European political community today is a sense that it is just a collection of nation states cooperating on areas in which they agree on. We're not going to go down the path of an EU-style model. In saying that, clearly, one of the decisions that was made around Brexit in 2016, whether you agree with Brexit or not, was that in many ways Britain was stepping back a little bit from its role inside Europe, the European Union being in many ways clearly the biggest political body inside Europe, again, whether you disagree or not. And Britain was meant to be global Britain, looking outside of the continent to our allies elsewhere in the world. So does that mean effectively that Britain's influence in Europe as a whole is a little bit diminished? I mean, by necessity, of course it is. Is that in relation to where she stood in the family picture? I'm not entirely sure. I think we can always read too much into this. The images I've seen today, where she's been talking to lots of European leaders, it seemed pretty relaxed. It's not like, do you remember when Theresa May turned up a couple of years ago at an EU summit when she was Prime Minister and was stood in the corner room with no one talking to her? That's not happening today. But, you know, does Britain have a different role in Europe than it did 5-10 years ago? Of course it does. That's by necessity Brexit. But is this different from the EU? That's the argument Liz Truss is making. And unsurprisingly, and maybe strangely though, that's the argument that Emmanuel Macron is making too.
Very
Darren.
diplomatic answer, I thought. Yes, very good. Darren, thank you very much indeed. On the banks of the Vltava in Prague. What a wonderful scene there. Thanks very much indeed. Now to London, 3 people being stabbed in Bishopsgate in the heart of the city during an attempted robbery, apparently by 3 men this morning. Let's cross to get the latest with our news correspondent Rosie Wright at the scene. Rosie, it seems that this was an attempt to grab a phone and then some have-a-go heroes got involved.
That is what the police suspect. There is still a significant police presence and significant police cordon here in Bishopsgate. We're right in the city of London, just sort of 200 metres or so away from the Bank of England. The police that I spoke to when we got to the scene originally said what they believe happened is someone was walking with their phone and then someone tried to grab it. Now, some members of the public, as you just mentioned there, Mark, tried to intervene, and that's when the injuries occurred. They say 4 people have been injured, 3 have been taken to hospital. They were taken by London Ambulance Service, who initially treated them here, and there's evidence of that stretching back about at least 100 metres or so behind this cordon. 1 person was injured but pushed to the floor, was not taken to hospital. Now, the police officer in charge here told me that they believe none of those injuries are life-threatening, but obviously serious enough to go to hospital, and there is, and there's lots of people walking past have noticed blood on the pavement here. Now, I must really stress, the police don't believe this is terror-related. They haven't either made any arrests. There was some footage going around, particularly on social media, at lunchtime today, of an arrest that was made in this area. The police have made it very clear that was a separate incident. They do have 2 persons of interest over the incident that took place here and those stabbings, but haven't made any arrests yet. Of course, it's a busy day in the centre of London, a working day. The cordon is now confined to the pavement, so people have been able to get to and from, but of course, a lot of people very worried about how something like this happened. The really key thing to mention, though, as well, 9:46 is when City of London police were informed of this attack, and then by 9:51, police were on the scene.
Rosie.
Wow. Amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing us up to date. Well, our business and economics editor is here with us because this morning the pound fell again after the UK's credit rating was downgraded.
Yes, one agency's Fitch, leading consultant, of course, on credit worthiness, saying it had cut the outlook for UK government debt from stable to negative. The overall rating constant at AA-, just a grade down from the highest AAA rating.
And in other news, which is just broken, households, this is a release from the National Grid, households will be paid to put on their washing machines or charge their electric cars during off-peak hours in a bid to prevent up to 3-hour blackouts this winter.
But it says here, before you start stocking up on
I've
firewood...
just stocked up on firewood.
I thought
I
thought they were trying to stop us putting wood-burning stoves in. Wasn't that Michael Gove's warning that, you know, it was bad for the environment? Anyway, we will have enough gas, they say, stored to get us through the winter, they say. Liam is joining us with On the Money. Well, we joke, but it's a serious issue because we've got the first official warning that there could, and we stress could, be 3-hour blackouts if things do go badly wrong.
Yeah, we'll come to that in 1 second if we may. Just to spool back to the pound, so Fitch is an international credit rating agency. One that people may have heard of is Standard & Poor's. They're like international consultants. They've said, I mean, we shouldn't over-egg this. They've said that the pound is at a AA- rating. That's the same rating it was, you know, a few months ago. Nothing's changed, but they've changed the outlook from stable to negative, and that's what's put pressure on the pound. I'd expect the pound to bounce back again quite quickly. So that's dealt with that for now. You're right, though, Mark. This is an official release saying that the government is going to help energy companies give people money back via their bills if they use energy at off-peak times, if they charge their EV car, their electric vehicle, overnight rather than peak hours, if they use things like dishwashers, washing machines, which use a surprising amount of power, actually, overnight. But slipped into that, you know, sort of quite nice message, we're going to help you, is further down the page, talking about planned 3-hour blackouts in some areas. Now, if you've talked to civil servants, if you talk to specialists in this area, people like me and have been talking on television about the possibility of planned blackouts for several months now. But to put this in a release that will be seen by sort of journalists in general is a much bigger deal. I don't think people should panic. I think that this is just a maybe, possibly, who knows, but it is the first high-profile official acknowledgement that these blackouts could happen.
They say it's unlikely, but yet they've issued this release. So they say don't panic, but how can you not panic when you read that possibility?
Because I think there are measures in place. Coal-fired power stations are literally being cranked back up. I think a lot of the kind of COP26 agenda is being sidelined. That will please some people. It will incense other people. That's the reality of politics. You know, Liz Truss just became Conservative leader off the back of a pledge to suspend green levies on our energy bills, our electricity bills anyway. So politics is shifting. And I think that if there are blackouts, they will be very, very short. And I think there will be other ways of getting energy, which the government and local authorities will lay on. You know, I actually remember, as I'm sure Mark does, we always sound like two old geezers, don't we?
Liam, I'm about a year younger than you.
Nothing wrong with that. All right, I am older than both of us. OK,
I was being chivalrous.
Yeah.
Gloria, I was being chivalrous.
Are you going to say, do you remember the 70s when we had to put candles on?
Yeah.
I remember. I remember too.
I've checked my garage to ensure the candles are still there. However, let's just sort of tie it down a bit. They're talking about, and this is for industry as well as domestic, that we will get a day's warning and we will be told probably when we get these 3-hour periods when it will go to blackout. So it's not as if they're just going to hit the switch and, you know, we'll be out of power.
No. Yeah. It will be planned. In the 70s, it sometimes wasn't planned.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the thing. And you'd be sitting there watching Morecambe and Wise.
You have to find the candles.
And then suddenly...
Yeah.
So it will be planned. That's what they say. And I'm sure they mean it. It strikes me, though, that this will escalate, you know, geopolitical tensions if obviously there's a lot of tension between Russia, Ukraine and the Western world. If major European economies like us are now talking about preparing our populations for blackouts, this will really change politics, Mark. There's no other way to assess this situation.
And can I ask you something very quickly as well, in that we've got OPEC, the oil cartel, limiting now production, which will put prices up at a time when obviously Biden and others saying, no, we need more stuff on the world markets to actually try and lower the oil price.
I mentioned this briefly with Bev Turner yesterday morning before the OPEC summit in Vienna. OPEC controls, the oil energy exporters cartel controls about 40% of the world's oil supply, but it controls about 80% of the oil in the ground, the reserves. Hugely powerful. Russia aren't in OPEC, of course they're a major oil exporter, but there's this grouping OPEC Plus where Russia works with OPEC if it feels like it, and clearly it does feel like it. And it's interesting, isn't it? In OPEC, you've got major Western allies like UAE, in the Gulf. You've got Saudi, who are kind of meant to be on the west side a lot of the time, as well as some other countries that clearly aren't, like Iran and Iraq. And the fact that OPEC are saying we are going to take oil off the market to try and boost prices, when prices are already above $90 a barrel. All right, they've come down from $120 a barrel, but they're still high by historic standards. That is not just an important move economically that will be felt when you fill up your car and van on the petrol forecourt. It's an important move geopolitically because it suggests that a lot of the rest of the world is not going to do the West we're predominantly oil importers, any favours in this ongoing battle with Russia.
Yeah. We shall, maybe get those candles out after all. For the moment, thank you.
Coming up, we'll be heading to Paris to speak with journalist Peter Allen ahead of the Prime Minister's meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, looking at what the future might hold for relations between the two countries. Before that, time for a little break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
So, Prime Minister Liz Truss and the French President Emmanuel Macron due to meet in Prague this evening. The main talking point, those cross-channel migration boats and the crisis there, the other side of the channel. They could be potentially difficult because, of course, during the leadership race, she said the jury was still out whether Monsieur Macron was a friend or foe.
So what is the future of UK-French relations? We can now speak to Paris journalist Peter Allen. Peter, actually, let's talk about how we tackle the small boats coming over here. There's been numerous sort of initiatives, cross-country initiatives between France and Britain. Loads of taxpayers' money exchanging hands, our money, to stop the small boat crossings. It hasn't worked. Is there anything that could happen at the meeting today which could solve the problem?
Well, it's going to be extremely difficult. It's been going on for years, this issue. In the early 2000s, there were masses of people making their way across that Calais-Dover crossing through the tunnel. Security has been improved in the tunnel enormously since then. Now people are travelling in small boats. How do you stop small boats in a safe manner that doesn't endanger lives? There have been terrible incidents, we all know, of people dying on that terrible crossing. Remember, France is a huge country of migration. People come in through the Mediterranean, they cross France, they try and get over to Britain across the Channel. But after years, nobody has really worked out a way of making such a country secure. And one would imagine that there'll be a lot of frustration on both sides during the meeting tonight. But I'd be amazed if there was any kind of breakthrough.
Indeed. Is Liz Truss likely to find out if he is friend or foe tonight?
Well, I think she learnt that, along with the rest of Britain, during that very sad period of the Queen's death and indeed the Queen's funeral. I think of all the people in the world, let alone the world leaders, the finest tributes of all, the most articulate, the most moving, the most sensitive, came from the President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron. He's a huge Anglophile, I can tell you that, having met him with British journalists here in Paris and in other parts of France. He always seeks out the British journalists and wants to speak to them. He's always very interested in what Britain thinks about him. He wants to improve the entente cordiale. There were a lot of tensions. Even before he became president, he was describing Brexit as a crime, for example. There have been policy issues over, as we were just talking about cross-channel migration, about vaccine distribution, about fishing rights. A lot of those issues still remain. But he very much wants to give the impression that beyond these policy differences, which are not eternal, issues can be solved. He is a huge Anglophile. He will make that very clear to British Prime Minister tonight. And one would hope that they'll build a pretty good relationship. He's had very good relationships with all kinds of world leaders, dare I say, including Vladimir Putin. He speaks to him regularly. President Macron is somebody who likes to speak to people, however controversial. Of course, Liz Truss is not a controversial figure at all, but she is somebody who's expressed a few reservations about Emmanuel Macron. But again, I think they should be cleared up in tonight's meeting, if not afterwards.
And Peter, we've got a warning here about possible blackouts this winter, and that the energy crisis as a result, of course, of Putin's invasion is at the top of the agenda. Is Macron likely to get some kind of pan-European agreement on that? Because clearly Germany has sort of stepped outside the accord at the moment.
Yes, he'll certainly be pushing for that. As we've seen since Angela Merkel stepped down, Emmanuel Macron has tried to push himself as a de facto leader of the EU, and energy supply is clearly a huge issue now with the Ukraine war going on, and I can certainly see him pushing for some kind of accord across the 27 EU member states.
Peter, in Paris, thanks very much for bringing us up to date. Thank you for your time.
Coming up, we'll be joined in the studio by our political reporter, Catherine Forster, to discuss what the future holds for Liz Truss when she comes back from that summit. But first, it's your news update with Rhiannon.
Good afternoon. It's 2:30 for your top stories from the GB newsroom. Power blackouts may have to be introduced in the UK this winter if the country fails to secure enough natural gas, a watchdog has warned. The National Grid Electricity System Operator, which oversees the network, has cautioned some homes may be without power for up to 3 hours a day 3 possible scenarios have been drawn up. The blackouts would be the most severe, but it has said that is unlikely. Coal-fired power plants are also being placed on standby as Europe struggles with a restricted gas supply following Russia's war with Ukraine. At least 38 people have been killed, including 22 children, some as young as 2, after a gunman opened fire at a childcare centre in Thailand. The shooting happened in the northeastern province of Nong Bua Lampu. Thai police say the gunman was a former officer discharged from the police force last year. Police have confirmed he killed himself, his wife and his child during the mass shooting. City of London Police says 3 people were stabbed in a suspected robbery attempt in Bishopsgate near Liverpool Street Station this morning. The force said the victims have been taken to hospital. Their condition isn't thought to be life-threatening. Police are looking for 2 suspects. No arrests have yet been made. The Prime Minister is at a summit in Prague for an historic first meeting of a new political club of nations. Liz Truss will call for European unity and address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges. She'll say Europe is facing its biggest crisis since the Second World War following Russian aggression. Ms Truss will also hold talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron in what could mark a new phase in the UK's post-Brexit relations with Europe. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark and Gloria will be back in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The National Grid is warning there could be 3-hour blackouts in some areas to protect supplies for heating homes and buildings. They're calling on households to use energy off-peak to prevent blackouts.
Well, joining us now, Seth Gray from the Lightbridge Corporation, specialising in nuclear energy. Seth, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us. We're nowhere near as well off in nuclear supplies as France, for instance, but clearly this is something we're going to have to address long-term to secure security energy.
Yes, absolutely. And in the immediate term, it's important that countries keep their reactors operating to avoid using natural gas that could help avoid blackouts in the UK and can help heat homes in much of Europe. It's also important that reactors that have recently closed reopen, as well as new reactors be built.
Report out, which just came out about 40 minutes ago, that British households could lose power for up to 3 hours at a time this winter if gas supplies run extremely low. Now, they say it's a worst-case scenario, but this is not just a British problem, is it?
Well, it's not. And while there's the meeting of leaders going on now, I hope there's talk of cooperation in energy, including optimizing use of nuclear power where needed, use coal plants so that natural gas can be shared to where it's absolutely needed and help avoid those blackouts.
A small island in relation to France, for instance, and the planning applications to build new nuclear plants, well, they take forever, and people, for understandable reasons, are very anxious about suddenly having this on their doorsteps. Is there such a thing as a safe nuclear reactor?
Yeah, there are very safe nuclear reactors and safer technologies that are coming now, like the fuels that Lightbridge are developing. I'd say the two fastest paths would be to put the new plants on the sites where the old plants have been. Those communities tend to be welcoming. They tend to understand the benefits. They have the connections to the electric grid. Things can just move faster on the existing sites. And secondly, sites that now have coal plants that can be repowered with new small nuclear reactors also have those benefits, where many of the people who work at the coal plants can run turbines, can do similar jobs at nuclear plants that will come, and also have the connection to the electrical grid and near cooling water. So coal plants are a very good place to put the new small reactors to move that along more quickly in welcoming communities.
Okay, well, we'll see, obviously, how we get on this winter, but clearly a lot of reassessment on energy supply. Seth Gray from Lightbridge Corporation, thanks for joining us there in Virginia in the States. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to domestic politics now, that the Tory party conference has come to an end. Catherine Forster, our reporter, is with us in the studio. She's in Prague today. Parliament returns next Tuesday. She needs to calm Tory MPs and make them think they can hold on to their seats.
Yes, she does. They need to stop looking at the polls, don't they, which are not positive for the Tories at the moment. I think there are...
Catherine, we're just going to adjust your mic while we just go through some of those polls.
Let's just update you with... she's actually made a short address in Prague, we're being told, using the history of the Czech Republic to speak about the need to stand up for freedom. This just coming in from Press Association. It's understood that she referenced Václav Havel, who, of course, was the first president of the Czech Republic following that collapse of communist rule. She gave a 5-minute speech to the plenary session at Prague Castle. Indeed, that was where Václav Havel was sworn in as president, saying she spoke for the need for a stronger, more resilient economy, as well as more resilient energy supplies. Well, there's a thing.
Catherine, you were telling us that you were hoping Conservative MPs were not looking too closely at opinion polls, which, of course, we know they absolutely will be looking incredibly closely at those opinion polls.
But next week, the Conservative whips are really going to have to try to get a grip of discipline, which seems to have gone out of the window completely during conference, doesn't it? Not just among disgruntled backbench MPs who may have previously held cabinet jobs like Michael Gove and Grant Shapps and Priti Patel, but also quite a few members of her own cabinet, most notably Penny Mordaunt, who, of course, also ran for the leadership. Suella Braverman also ran for the leadership. Kemi Badenoch also ran for the leadership. See a pattern here, who are openly disagreeing with policy, with direction, with certain things that Liz Truss wants to do, which is obviously very damaging for her.
And is the reality that perhaps a lot of those people are now more frightened of losing their seats, losing the general election, than they are of losing the party whip or having the whip's office ringing them up?
I suspect so.
Well, you're out either way, aren't you?
You do wonder, don't you? Because obviously Boris Johnson threw out a couple of dozen members of his own party, didn't he, to get Brexit done, as he said, and to win that 80-seat majority. And you do wonder with some of them how far they are prepared to take this, because many of them believe that if they don't change course, they are looking at a total wipeout.
Do you know what I have to say, just from my experience on that? During Brexit, some Labour MPs, they stood out against the line and said no to a second referendum, which was in the manifesto. It doesn't save you. It doesn't save you. Just people don't vote for you as the individual, even if you take a different position or if you are more outspoken on a position. They see you collectively. They know they are electing a government. So they've got to sort of come together. Really.
Voters don't like divided parties,
no,
do they? But at the same time, you know, she's been in the job 4.5 weeks, and already there's so much speculation about could they get rid of her? Could they get Rishi Sunak in by Christmas? Could they get some caretaker prime minister, somebody who is well liked across the party, maybe Education Secretary Kit Malthouse, maybe Sajid Javid? I mean, it's astonishing. Could they bring back Boris Johnson?
That's what everyone would like, isn't it? Well, loads of people, loads of Tory party members would like.
Well, is part of the problem that the whole structure of the leadership election, that the majority of MPs were for Rishi Sunak, and of course it was actually the party membership that voted for the new leader. So they've actually got a very different focus on capabilities and the way forward. And you know, Nadine Dorries saying that Liz Truss is taking the party away from the centre ground, which should be the battlefield for politics, right over to the right.
I think that's absolutely true, what you say about the difference between the membership and the MPs. The membership are always generally to the right of where the MPs are. So she's promised tax cuts, tax cuts, tax cuts. But we haven't yet got the information how it's going to be paid for. Interestingly, the Institute for Fiscal Studies this morning saying that actually there's still going to be £21 billion extra in taxes because of the fiscal drag, the stealth taxes that will come in through the personal allowance and the higher rate not being uprated. Now, that was a Rishi Sunak policy brought in for 4 years, and that freeze is continuing. So for all the talk of tax cuts,
we're still going to be paying more tax.
Yeah, taxes.
You're going to lose more than you gain through the tax cuts and the reversal of the national insurance rise, basically. They're
saying for every £1 given by the government's tax cuts, you're going to get £2 taken away in stealth taxes.
If you had that as sort of consumer advice panel, you'd say that was a scam, wouldn't you? But
well, yeah, and Jake Berry out this morning talking about Nadine Dorries and what she's saying, and he's saying, well, I don't quite understand some of this, because in any case, what the IFS is saying, that the tax burden actually is still very high. So in some ways, the tax burden is still very high, but the government are coming in for a lot of criticism for cutting it. So it's a confusing message.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for explaining it, however.
And it should be said that the heat will come on to Labour very soon. Now that they are seen as a potential government, lots of people will be looking at their economic plans too, and we will be doing that too, of course. Now, hate crimes in England and Wales have increased by 26% in the last year, but police are prosecuting a tiny proportion of these offences.
Well, these latest figures issued by the Home Office showing that there were 155,000 so-called hate crimes recorded by forces across the country up to March this year. It's the biggest percentage increase in some 5 years.
However, the number of offences resulting in a police charge have dropped to 8% of the total.
And statistics that we can show you here, 70% of crimes, they say, were racially motivated. Religious hate crimes increasing by 37%. Sexual orientation, well, they rose by 41%.
Transgender identity rose by 56%. And disability hate crimes increased by 43%. Joining us on the show now is Graham Whetton, who's a former police officer and author of How to Be a Police Officer. Graham, good to speak to you. What do you take away? What's your main takeaway from these figures on hate crime?
I think a number of factors. I think there's improved recording now. I think the public are more aware of what hate crime is. And bear in mind, a hate crime can be reported not just by the victim, but by anybody else who perceives it to be a hate crime. So you may well get the situation where someone else reports a hate crime, either on behalf of or for the victim himself, and then the victim doesn't actually want to proceed with it. So, you know, numbers will be going up because the police are getting better at recording hate crimes. As you alluded to, prosecutions are dropping for a number of reasons.
And this goes to the centre and the heart of this whole debate about so-called woke policing and what actually constitutes a hate crime, and whether, in fact, they should be spending their time on burglaries, of course, as we were hearing yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything can't be a priority. You know, yes, it was burglaries need to be a priority. It's always domestic abuse cases, critical incidents, mental health cases, missing persons. The list is endless as to what becomes a priority. Today, it seems that we're looking at the figures for hate crime. Hate crime is increasing across society. People are more aware of it. They're more keen to report it. The police are keener to actually note the allegations and see where hate crimes are taking place, so they can focus some patrols in that area. But all these reports and recording crimes are going up, yet detections and prosecutions or charges are going down.
Is for recording a hate crime. Can it be verbal? Does it have to be physical? What's an example of a hate crime?
It can be, as you said, it can be physical violence, it can be verbal, it can be threats or abuse, etc. on the street. A number of factors can constitute what a hate crime is, but if it's perceived by the victim or anybody else to be motivated by someone's either race, religion, sexuality, disability, etc., it constitutes being a hate crime and it's classified as such. So the classification's been honed or listed better now, so forces are recording these a lot better. So as soon as you start recording something a lot more accurately, numbers will increase.
But presumably the reason you go and report a crime is because you want something to happen and someone to be prosecuted, and that's the difficulty here. It's not happening.
Partly people want it recorded because they want it reported as such. They don't always want it to be prosecuted. They don't always want to go to court. And once you start explaining the court process, giving a statement, coming to court, repeating that statement in front of your suspect, and again, you've got the evidential issues of sometimes, if it's just words between two people, it's one person's word against another. So quite often the police may feel they have sufficient evidence, but the Crown Prosecution Service are reluctant to charge because it doesn't meet the threshold test for the evidence to get to court. And they don't think they stand a good chance of getting a prosecution. Hence, on some occasions, charges will drop.
And just with what you've explained there, I'm just sort of estimating how much police time all that takes up and all the forms that have to be filled and all the boxes that have to be ticked.
Yeah, the administration is phenomenal now. If you make one arrest on the shift, that can take you out for the whole shift, whole 8 hours. If you're waiting for solicitors, appropriate adults, evidence to come in, go and get a statement from the victim, statements from witnesses, etc. The whole process now takes far, far longer than it ever did when I was working. So again, the delays that are inbuilt within the police systems, but then come into the criminal justice system. And then when you say to your victim, this may be some months before we get this case to court, if we do get it to court, it does put a lot of people off. And as long as it's been reported, the police know about it, it's on record. Some victims are content with that. Obviously, many others would like it prosecuted.
OK, Graham Watone, former police officer and author of How to Be a Police Officer. Thank you very much indeed.
Or why you wouldn't want to be a police officer. Maybe you ought to rename that book. Plenty of views coming in from you on all the politics of the day. Annie's been in touch. In Newbury, electric spotlights used in flats and the police station as well. The police station with no one in the station, every light on. Is this fair when we're being told to reduce our electricity use? Good point, actually.
Elizabeth says, not surprised by this, but we've already got candles in, blankets, and, of course, a wood-burning stove. So I'm already getting ready.
Michael Gove won't like you. And John, it's come out in black and white. Net zero green energy is not working. Bring on gas explorations and fracking to sort out our country in the short term.
Liz Truss will like you.
Yeah, OK. Who's next?
David.
OK.
Why are we trying to set up deals for gas with other countries when we have our own in the seas surrounding our island?
So who's going to like David? Well, quite a lot of people, actually. I think, yeah, back to exploring for oil and gas offshore. Keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Oh, there's another one coming in. This is Andy, is it?
This is on. I think this is on the Liz Truss being at the summit today.
If Truss puts one foot wrong here, she'll be ousted, as was Theresa May. As for holding these meetings every 6 months, yet more evidence that these people condemning us to net zero couldn't care less about the climate as they add another set of international jollies to their agenda.
I have some sympathy with that. Mike says Truss is wise to be cautious with Macron. He could any time stop our electric. The grid is under his control, the Channel Tunnel, the fishing dispute and many more things unfriendly.
I think that's foe rather than friend, don't you? Matthew, I've said it before and I'm not wrong. Macron will never cooperate on migrants, otherwise it becomes his problem and his financial burden. He'll try to make it look like he's cooperating, but with zero intention to help our predicament.
And Jackie says if Liz Truss signs up to this new European political community with Macron, should be signing up for us to rejoin the European Union via the back door. Honestly, the EU must think we're stupid, and if Truss does sign us up, it will be the death of the Tories for good. I suppose we should point out that we have, of course, left the European Union. That was clear and is clear, but we're still in Europe, whether we like it or not.
Let's just, clearly, this issue of energy supply and blackouts is actually worrying a lot of you, actually. Let's just give you some more detail on what we're getting from both the National Grid's Gas Transmission Unit and also its Electricity System Operating Department, very snappily entitled. They are saying that the 3-hour outages will actually get prior warning. They will be the day before the warning coming through, and they will try and offset the risk of blackouts by paying people to use your dishwasher, your washing machine, charging your electric car in off-peak times. They're not saying how much you will get in money, but certainly OVO, the energy supply company, is saying that customers could save up to £100 if you signed up to use energy off-peak times.
And it is, before we leave you, it is important to stress that the National Grid say that it is unlikely, it's an unlikely scenario that, but added that supply interruptions were a possibility, but they are unlikely. Thank you.
The Demand Flexibility Service. That's another snappy title we come up with from November to March. There we go.
Thank you for watching GB Newsday with me and with me and Matt.
Both of us. Yeah, me and him, as the two Ronnies used to say. Back on Monday at 12. Up next, GB News Live with Patrick Christis. If, of course, you've got enough energy to keep the telly on. Before that, the weather.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. For many, a fine, bright day out there today. There's a fair bit of cloud across parts of south of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and a few showers likely here. It's quite breezy as well, but not as windy as yesterday. Low pressure dominant to the north. High pressure, though, controlling things further south, which means much of southern England, South Wales, won't see many showers at all. Staying dry and bright here, and the same goes for much of eastern England and northeast Scotland. It's further north and west where we've got more cloud and some outbreaks of rain pushing into North Wales and northwest England, across Northern Ireland and parts of western Scotland. A mixture of sunshine and blustery showers across the far north. In the sunny spells further south, well, temperatures getting up into the high teens, 20 Celsius is just about possible. Generally, we're looking at 16 or 17 the high.